My daughter-in-law broke into my apartment 18 times in just 2 months. I asked her to stop. She laughed in my face and told me I was overreacting. She told my son that I was becoming senile and selfish. She treated my sanctuary like her personal photography studio and my life savings like her future inheritance. So I did not argue. I did not scream. I simply moved out quietly and replaced the locks with a silent alarm system connected directly to the precinct. A week later, the alarm went off at 3 a.m. That was when everything changed. That was when she learned that the only thing worse than a grumpy old man is a structural engineer who knows exactly how to dismantle a foundation. Before I tell you how I sent her to prison, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to teach a disrespectful relative a lesson they would never forget. My name is Major Gibson. I am 68 years old, and for 4 decades I worked as a structural engineer in Chicago. My job was to ensure that skyscrapers and bridges could withstand the brutal winds coming off Lake Michigan. I spent my life calculating loads, stresses, and fracture points. I lived by a code of precision and discipline. If a beam is off by a fraction of an inch, the whole building falls. I applied that same discipline to my life. My duplex in the Hyde Park neighborhood was my masterpiece. I bought it in the 90s with my late wife Betty. We worked double shifts to pay it off. It was not just a house, it was a museum of our memories. Since Betty passed away 2 years ago, I have kept everything exactly as she left it. The coasters stayed on the left side of the coffee table. The blinds were drawn at exactly 4 p.m. to protect the mahogany floors from the sun. Silence was my roommate and order was my religion. I lived in Unit A on the ground floor. My son Jalen and his wife Skylar lived upstairs in Unit B rent-free. I thought I was helping them save for a down payment. I did not realize I was harboring a parasite that was slowly eating away at my peace. The incident that started the war happened on a Tuesday. I had gone to my physical therapy appointment for my knee. The doctor had worked me hard and my joints were screaming for rest. All I wanted was to sit in my leather armchair, pour a glass of iced tea, and listen to my jazz collection. I limped up the front walkway and noticed something immediately. The front door was unlocked. I knew I had locked it. I always checked the deadbolt twice. It was a habit from my days on construction sites. I pushed the door open and the smell hit me first. It was not the smell of my lemon oil wood polish. It was a sickeningly sweet scent. Vanilla and artificial flowers. It smelled like a cheap candle store in a mall. My heart rate spiked. I stepped into the living room and dropped my cane. My sanctuary had been violated. My living room looked like a tornado had touched down inside a fashion magazine. My heavy oak coffee table had been dragged to the center of the room, scratching the hardwood floor I had refinished myself last summer. 2 massive ring lights on tripods were set up near the fireplace, blinding me with their glare. There were clothes everywhere. Cheap polyester dresses in neon colors were draped over my antique lamps. Shoes were scattered across the Persian rug Betty had brought back from our anniversary trip to Morocco. But what made my blood run cold was not the mess. It was the music. Someone was playing my records. I walked over to the turntable. Skylar was there. She was wearing one of those neon dresses, posing with a glass of iced coffee in her hand. She was leaning against my record cabinet, using it as a prop. The record spinning on the platter was Miles Davis. Get Up With It, the original 1974 pressing. It was one of the last gifts Betty ever gave me. It was mint condition, or at least it had been. Skylar looked up and saw me. She did not jump. She did not look guilty. She just smiled, that fake plastic smile she used for her phone screen. "Oh, hey, Major," she said casually, like she had not just broken into my home. "You are back early. I thought your appointment went until noon." I looked at the record sleeve sitting on the table next to her. My stomach dropped. There was a wet brown ring right on the face of Miles Davis. She had used the cardboard cover of a $500 record as a coaster for her sweating cup of cheap iced coffee. The moisture had already soaked into the paper, warping it, staining it forever. I felt a heat rise up the back of my neck that I had not felt since I was a young man in the army. My hands shook. I pointed at the record sleeve. "Get out," I said. My voice was low. It was the rumble of a building about to collapse. Skylar rolled her eyes. She picked up her phone and stopped recording. She actually sighed as if I was the one inconveniencing her. "Major, relax," she said, taking a sip of her drink. "We are just getting some content for my lifestyle brand. The lighting in your unit is so much better than upstairs. The vintage vibe down here is totally trending right now. My followers love the old money aesthetic." Old money aesthetic. She was talking about my life. She was talking about the things my wife and I had bled for. She called it an aesthetic. I walked over and snatched the record sleeve from the table. The water damage was done. The cardboard was mushy under my thumb. I looked at her and I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her. But I am a disciplined man. I channeled that rage into cold, hard facts. You broke into my apartment, I said, enunciating every word. You dragged my furniture across the floor, and you destroyed property that does not belong to you. Get your equipment and get out. Now. Skylar laughed. It was a high-pitched, dismissive sound. She looked at me like I was a toddler throwing a tantrum. You are overreacting, she said. It is just an old record. I will buy you a new one on Amazon. They are like $20. And seriously, Major, you are being so selfish. You have this huge living room and you live alone. You barely even use this space. I am actually trying to build a career here. I am an influencer. I need space to create. You should be happy I am utilizing the square footage. It is wasteful for one old man to hoard all this space. I stood there stunned by her audacity. This was the logic of a thief who thinks they are doing you a favor. She truly believed that because I was old, my needs were secondary to her desires. She believed that because she was young and loud on the internet, she mattered more. I stepped closer to her. I am a big man. Even at 68, I stand 6'2". I let my shadow fall over her and her ring lights. This is not space, I hissed. This is my home. And that record is not just vinyl, it was a gift from my wife. You do not have the right to touch a single speck of dust in this house. Now take your lights and your cheap clothes and get out before I call the police and have you removed for trespassing. Skylar scoffed. She began gathering her things, but she made sure to be as loud and rough as possible. She slammed the tripod legs together. She threw the dresses into a pile. You are going to call the cops on your daughter-in-law, she sneered. Wow. Jalen was right. You really are losing it. You are becoming a bitter, lonely old man. No wonder nobody visits you. She walked to the door carrying her gear. Before she left, she turned back and looked at the ruined record sleeve in my hand. By the way, that jazz music is depressing. You should really update your playlist if you want good energy in here. She slammed the door. The vibrations rattled the crystals in the chandelier. I stood in the silence of my ruined sanctuary. My knee was throbbing. My hand was still clutching the damp record cover. I looked around at the scratches on the floor. I looked at the ring of water on the table. I walked to the door and engaged the deadbolt. I knew as I turned the metal latch that it was a meaningless gesture. Jalen had a key for emergencies, and Jalen did whatever Skylar told him to do. If she wanted to come back in, she would. I sat down in my leather chair, but I did not pour the tea. I did not play the music. I sat in the dark, and I analyzed the structure of my family. I looked at the load-bearing walls, and I realized they were rotten. My son was weak, his wife was a predator, and I was the foundation they were planning to strip for parts. Skylar thought this was just a disagreement about a record. She thought I was just a grumpy old man who would get over it. She did not know that she had just insulted a man who plans projects 5 years in advance. She had not just stained a record cover. She had stained my respect for her. And unlike cardboard, that stain would never wash out. I pulled out my phone and opened the calendar app. I began to type a note. It was not a diary entry. It was an evidence log. Entry 1, I typed. Unauthorized entry. Property damage, verbal abuse. I looked at the camera lens of the security system I had installed in the hallway years ago. It was an old model not connected to the cloud. I realized I needed an upgrade. If she wanted to play games with my home, I would turn my home into a trap. I went to the kitchen and got a paper towel to blot the moisture from the Miles Davis album. As I dabbed at the wet cardboard, I made a promise to Betty. I promised her that no one would ever disrespect our home again. Skylar wanted a show. She wanted content. Well, I decided right then and there that I would give her the most dramatic season finale she could ever imagine. But first, I had to see just how far she was willing to go. I had to let her think she had won. I did not know then that this was only the beginning. I did not know that she would return 17 more times. I did not know she would come for the jewelry next. But I was ready. I am Major Gibson. I build things to last, and I demolish things that threaten my safety. The demolition was about to begin. The following Sunday started like any other day in my house. I woke up at 6 in the morning because my internal clock does not know the meaning of the word weekend. I made my coffee black and strong. I sat in the kitchen and watched the sun come up over the garden Betty and I had planted 20 years ago. The hydrangeas were blooming. Betty loved those flowers. She used to say they were like clouds that had fallen to the earth. After coffee, I began my weekly inspection. This is a habit from my engineering days. You do not wait for a crack to appear in the concrete. You look for the hairline fractures before they become disasters. I dusted the baseboards. I checked the window seals. And then I went into my bedroom to perform the most important ritual of my week. On the nightstand next to my bed sat a small velvet box. It was navy blue, and the velvet was worn down in the corners from years of being touched. Inside that box was the most valuable thing I owned. It was not valuable because of the appraisal price, although the 2-carat diamond was worth a small fortune. It was valuable because it was the promise I made to Betty in 1974. It was the ring I put on her finger when I had nothing but a dream and a drafting table. Every Sunday, I opened the box to check on it. I would polish the gold band with a soft cloth. I would hold it up to the light and watch the diamond catch the sun. It was my way of holding her hand again. It was my way of telling her that I was still here and I was still keeping my promises. I walked to the nightstand. The house was quiet. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator down the hall. I reached out and picked up the box. Immediately, my stomach turned over. The box felt wrong. It was too light. In my line of work, weight is everything. You know the weight of a steel beam. You know the weight of a concrete slab, and you know the weight of the gold ring that defined your life. The box in my hand felt like air. It felt like a hollow shell. My hands started to tremble. It was a subtle tremor at first, like the vibration of a bridge in high wind. I slowly lifted the lid. My breath stuck in my throat. Empty. The white satin cushion inside was bare. The indentation where the ring had sat for 2 years was there staring back at me like an open grave. I did not scream. I did not yell. I froze. My mind went into overdrive. I started running calculations, possibilities, variables. Had I moved it? No. I never moved it. Had I taken it out to clean it and forgotten to put it back? Impossible. I am a creature of habit. I do not forget where I put the symbol of my marriage. I dropped the box on the bed and began to search. It was a frantic search, but it was controlled. I did not throw things. I lifted them. I checked under the nightstand. I checked inside the drawer. I checked the bathroom counter. I checked the pockets of the pants I had worn yesterday. Nothing. I went back to the bedroom and stood in the center of the room. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a jackhammer. The panic was rising. It was a cold, dark water filling my lungs. That ring was Betty. It was the last piece of her that I could hold. Losing it felt like losing her all over again. And then the logic kicked in. Rings do not walk away. Rings do not vanish into thin air. If the ring was gone, it was because someone had taken it. I turned and looked at the hallway. Above the doorframe sat the old security camera I had installed 5 years ago. It was not a smart camera. It did not send alerts to my phone. It just recorded to a memory card that looped every 48 hours. I grabbed the stepladder from the closet. I climbed up and pulled the SD card out. My hands were steady now. The panic had been replaced by a cold, hard focus. I needed data. I needed proof. I went to my study and plugged the card into my laptop. I sat there in the dark, waiting for the files to load. I started scanning through the footage from the last 2 days. Friday, nothing, just me coming and going. Saturday, nothing. Then I saw it. Tuesday morning, 10:17 in the morning. I was at the grocery store on Tuesdays. It was my schedule. Everyone knew it. On the screen, the front door opened. Skylar walked in. She did not look around. She did not hesitate. She moved with the confidence of someone who owns the place. She was wearing her workout clothes and holding a smoothie. She walked straight past the living room. She walked down the hallway. She disappeared into my bedroom. I watched the timestamp tick by. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. At 10:20, she emerged. She was walking faster now. She looked excited, and there in her right hand she was clenching something. It was small. It glittered in the low light of the hallway. She shoved it into her pocket and walked out the front door, locking it behind her. I sat back in my chair. I felt a physical blow to my chest. It was not just theft. It was a violation so deep it felt like surgery without anesthesia. She had gone into my bedroom. She had opened the drawer where I kept my private memories. She had touched the velvet box that I treated like a religious artifact, and she had taken it. She had stolen Betty. I closed the laptop. I did not cry. I did not throw the computer against the wall. I picked up my phone and dialed my son. "Jalen, come down here. Now." I hung up before he could answer. I walked to the kitchen and stood by the island. I needed to be standing. I needed to be the structure that did not bend. I heard the footsteps upstairs. Heavy, slow. Then the sound of the door opening and closing. Jalen walked into my kitchen. He was wearing pajama pants and a t-shirt. He looked tired. He looked soft. He saw my face and he stopped near the refrigerator. He did not come closer. He knew. I could see it in his eyes. He knew exactly why I had called him. "Where is it, Jalen?" I asked. My voice was quiet. It was too quiet. He rubbed the back of his neck. He looked at the floor. He looked at the window. He looked everywhere except at his father. "Where is what, Dad?" he asked. But his voice cracked. "Do not play games with me," I said. "The ring. Your mother's engagement ring. The one Skylar took from my nightstand on Tuesday morning while I was buying groceries." Jalen let out a long sigh. It was the sigh of a man who is tired of juggling lies. He walked over to the counter and leaned against it. He tried to smile. It was a weak, pathetic thing. "Okay, look, Dad," he said. "She did not steal it. That is a harsh word. She just borrowed it." "Borrowed it," I repeated. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. You borrow a cup of sugar. You borrow a lawnmower. You do not borrow a 2-carat diamond ring from a dead woman's bedroom without asking. Jalen waved his hand dismissively. "She has a big shoot today, Dad. It is for a bridal magazine or something on Instagram. I do not know the details. She needed a vintage ring to complete the look. She said the modern stuff looks too fake. She was going to bring it back this afternoon. She wanted to surprise you with the photos." "Surprise me?" I stepped forward. My anger was a cold fire now. "You think I want to see my dead wife's ring on the finger of the woman who treats me like a janitor in my own home?" Jalen straightened up. He started to get defensive. This was his mechanism. When he was cornered, he attacked. "You are overreacting, Dad," he said. "Seriously, it is just a piece of jewelry. It is sitting in a box gathering dust. At least Skylar is giving it a new life. She is honoring Mom in her own way. You are so attached to these objects. It is not healthy. You need to let go of the past. Skylar is just trying to build her career. She is stressed out. We are under a lot of pressure right now, and you are making a mountain out of a molehill." I looked at my son. I really looked at him. I saw a man of 32 years. He had my chin. He had Betty's eyes. But inside he was empty. There was no steel in his spine. There was no concrete in his foundation. He was a structure built on sand. He was standing there defending a thief. He was gaslighting his own father. He was telling me that my grief was an inconvenience to his wife's vanity. He was telling me that my property was theirs to use whenever they saw fit. In that moment, something broke. It was not a loud break. It was like the snap of a tension cable deep inside a bridge. You do not hear it, but the integrity of the structure is gone forever. I realized then that I had lost my son. I had lost him a long time ago. I had lost him to his own weakness. He was terrified of Skylar. He would rather see me bleed than see her frown. He was not a partner to her. He was her hostage, and now he was her accomplice. I took a breath. I stood up to my full height. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment. "Jalen," I said. "Yeah," he answered, hoping the storm had passed. "Go upstairs. Get the ring. Bring it to me. Now." He rolled his eyes. "Dad, come on. She is in the middle of getting ready. The lighting is perfect right now. Can't you wait until I slammed my hand down on the granite counter?" The sound was like a gunshot. Now I roared. Jalen flinched. He took a step back. He had never seen me like this. He had seen me stern. He had seen me disappointed, but he had never seen me dangerous. He turned and ran. He ran out of the kitchen and up the stairs. I stood there and listened to the sounds from the floor above. I heard murmuring. Then I heard Skylar's voice raised in annoyance. "Are you kidding me?" she screamed. "He is such a control freak. It is just a stupid ring." Then I heard stomping. 5 minutes later, Jalen came back down. He walked into the kitchen. He did not look at me. He walked to the island and dropped the ring on the granite. It made a small metallic clink. "There," he said, his voice dripping with attitude. "Are you happy now?" "She is crying upstairs. I hope you feel good about yourself. You ruined her mood for the shoot." I picked up the ring. I checked the stone. It was still there. I wiped a smudge of makeup off the gold band with my thumb. I looked at Jalen. I saw the resentment in his face. He blamed me. He actually blamed me for reclaiming my own property. "Get out of my kitchen," I said. Jalen shook his head. "You are impossible," he muttered. He turned and walked away. I watched him go. I waited until I heard the door upstairs close. I walked back to my bedroom. I put the ring back in the velvet box. I put the box back in the drawer. But the sanctuary was gone. The safety was gone. I sat on the edge of my bed and I realized the truth. A lock on the door would not stop them. A stern lecture would not stop them. They did not respect me. They did not respect my home. They saw me as an obstacle. They saw my things as their inventory. Jalen was right about one thing. I was holding on to the past. I was holding on to the idea that we were a family. I was holding on to the idea that if I just loved them enough, they would treat me with dignity. I was wrong. Calculations do not lie. The data was in front of me. The load was too heavy. The beams were buckling. The collapse was inevitable. I needed a new plan. I needed to stop reinforcing a building that was destined to fall. I needed to demolish it. I opened the drawer again. I did not look at the ring this time. I reached past the velvet box. I reached to the back of the drawer where I kept a heavy manila envelope. I pulled it out. On the front of the envelope was a label typed in my precise engineer's font. Property deeds and title. I ran my hand over the paper. This was the nuclear option. This was the button you only push when the enemy has breached the walls. Skylar wanted my space. She wanted my home. I stood up and walked to my desk. I picked up my phone. I did not call Jalen. I did not call the police. Not yet. I dialed a number I had not called in 10 years. It rang twice. Rossi and Associates, a voice answered. "Hello," I said. My voice was steady. My hands were still. "This is Major Gibson. I need to speak to Anthony Rossi. Tell him I am ready to talk about the Omega Protocol." I looked up at the ceiling towards the floor where my son and his wife were probably complaining about me right now. "Enjoy the apartment while you can," I whispered, because the eviction notice is not coming from me. It is coming from reality, and reality hits harder than any wrecking ball. The following Saturday was the day my backyard ceased to be my own. For 30 years, that yard had been a place of quiet reflection. Betty and I had planted the weeping willow tree in the corner the year we moved in. We had laid the flagstone path together, her hands covered in dirt, laughing as we tried to level the stones. It was a sanctuary where the only sounds were the wind in the leaves and the distant hum of Chicago traffic. But on that Saturday, it sounded like a nightclub had exploded inside a fraternity house. Skylar decided to host a barbecue. She did not ask me. She informed me. She sent me a text message at 7 in the morning that simply said, "Keep the back gate unlocked. People are coming at noon." By 1 o'clock, there were 40 people crowding the small patch of grass. I recognized none of them. They were Skylar's people. Influencers. Wannabe models. People who spent more time looking at their phone screens than at the person standing next to them. The air was thick with the smell of cheap cologne and charcoal smoke. I was in the kitchen trying to make a sandwich. I just wanted to eat lunch in peace. But peace was not on the menu. The back door flew open and Skylar marched in. She was wearing a white sundress and holding an empty pitcher. She did not say hello. She did not ask how I was doing. She slammed the pitcher down on the counter next to my bread. "Major, we are out of iced tea," she said. She did not look at me. She was looking at her reflection in the microwave door, fixing a strand of hair. I looked at the pitcher. I looked at her. And I asked, "And you need to make more," she said, turning to face me with a look of genuine irritation. "And while you are at it, can you take the trash out from the patio? The bin is overflowing and it looks gross in the background of my photos." I stood there holding a slice of turkey. I felt a muscle in my jaw jump. I am a retired engineer. I have managed multi-million-dollar infrastructure projects. I have led teams of hundreds of men. And here was this woman living in my house for free, ordering me around like I was the hired help. "I am eating my lunch," I said calmly. "Jalen can take out the trash." Skylar laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "Jalen is busy grilling. He is actually contributing to the party. You are just standing here taking up space. Come on, Major, be useful for once. Just make the tea. It gives you something to do besides staring at the wall." She grabbed a bottle of wine from the fridge and breezed out the door, leaving it wide open. Flies buzzed into my pristine kitchen. I put the turkey back in the fridge. My appetite was gone. I walked to the back door to close it. Through the screen, I saw Jalen. He was standing by the grill flipping burgers. He was sweating. He looked miserable. Skylar was on the other side of the yard holding court with a group of 3 women who looked exactly like her. I stepped out onto the small back porch. I intended to call Jalen over and tell him to get his guests under control. But then I heard my name. It came from the cluster of chairs near the willow tree where Skylar was sitting. The wind was blowing towards the house, carrying their voices clearly to where I stood in the shadows of the porch. "So is that him?" one of the women asked, tilting her head towards the house. "The old guy in the window." "Yeah, that is," Major Skylar said. She took a sip of wine. "God, he is so creepy sometimes. He just lurks around." "He looks healthy, though," another woman said. "Like he is going to be around for a while." Skylar let out a loud groan. "Do not remind me. He is healthy as a horse physically, but mentally he is totally slipping. He forgot where he put his wife's ring the other day and blamed me for stealing it. Can you believe that? He is getting paranoid. Classic dementia symptoms, if you ask me." My hands clenched into fists at my sides. I stood frozen. I was not paranoid. I was observant. "So what is the plan?" the friend asked. "You cannot live in that tiny upstairs unit forever." Skylar leaned in closer to her friends. Her face lit up with a greedy excitement. "Oh, we have a plan," she whispered, but loudly enough for the devil to hear. "Jalen is working on him. We are going to convince him that the house is too much work for him to manage alone. There is this assisted living facility in the suburbs. It is cheap, but it looks okay in the brochures. Once we get him to sign the power of attorney, we are shipping him off." She gestured widely with her wine glass, encompassing the whole yard and the house behind me. "And then comes the renovation," she said. "I have already talked to a contractor. We are going to gut the ground floor, knock down all those stupid walls, open concept studio, floor-to-ceiling windows. We will connect the upstairs and downstairs. It is going to be a mansion. My followers are going to lose their minds when they see the before and after." "But what about his stuff?" the friend asked. "He has a lot of antique junk in there," Dumpster Skylar said, waving her hand dismissively. "We will keep a few vintage pieces for aesthetic like that old record player, but the rest is trash. He will not need it where he is going." The women all laughed. They clinked their glasses together. A toast to my eviction. A toast to my erasure. I stood on the porch. The heat of the afternoon sun was beating down on the roof, but I felt ice cold. I looked at Jalen. He was 20 feet away from his wife. He had to have heard parts of that conversation, or at least he knew the plan. He knew they were plotting to declare me incompetent. He knew they were planning to gut the home he grew up in. And he said nothing. He just flipped the burgers. He just served the food. I looked at the willow tree Betty and I had planted. Skylar was kicking her heels against its trunk, scuffing the bark. In that moment, the last cable snapped. The sadness evaporated. The grief for the relationship I thought I had with my son vanished. What replaced it was a clarity so sharp it cut. I was no longer a father. I was no longer a father-in-law. I was a structural engineer looking at a building that was infested with termites. You do not negotiate with termites. You do not ask them to leave nicely. You exterminate them, or you burn the structure down so they have nothing left to eat. I turned around and walked back into the kitchen. I did not make the iced tea. I did not take out the trash. I walked through the living room past the records Skylar wanted to keep as props. I walked down the hallway to my study. I closed the door and locked it. The noise of the party was muffled now, a distant thumping bass. I walked to the large painting of the Chicago skyline hanging behind my desk. I swung it open to reveal the wall safe. My fingers moved automatically over the dial. Right to 24, left to 10, right to 48, Betty's birthday. The heavy steel door clicked open. Inside lay the paperwork of my life, the insurance policies, the bonds, and at the bottom the thick envelope containing the deed to the house. I reached in and pulled it out. The paper felt heavy. It felt real. This piece of paper said that I, Major Gibson, was the sole owner of this land. It said that my sweat and my labor had paid for every brick. It was the only thing in this world that Skylar could not gaslight away. I walked to my desk and sat down. I opened the envelope and spread the deed out on the blotter. I smoothed the creases with my hand. I looked at the date, 1992. I thought about the young man who signed this paper. He had dreams of raising a family here. He had dreams of growing old on that back porch watching his grandchildren play. Those dreams were dead. Skylar had killed them. and Jalen had buried them. I picked up my phone. I did not look at the text messages from Jalen asking where the ice was. I pulled up the contact for Anthony Rossi. I had called his office earlier in the week to ask hypotheticals. Now I was ready for absolutes. I looked at the deed one last time. Skylar wanted an open concept. She wanted to knock down walls. I picked up a pen and wrote a note on a sticky pad attached to the file. Sell it all. I stood up. I put the deed into my briefcase. I put the briefcase by the door. I walked to the window and looked out at the party one last time. Skylar was taking a selfie holding her glass up to the sun, smiling that predatory smile. She thought she was the queen of the castle. She thought she had won the war against the senile old man. She did not know that the castle was already rigged with explosives, and I was holding the detonator. I turned off the lights in my study. I walked out of the room. I did not go back to the kitchen. I went to my bedroom and started packing a small bag. The party raged on outside. They were celebrating their future. I was preparing their end. Monday morning arrived with the gray steel sky that Chicago is famous for. I put on my best suit. It was a charcoal three-piece wool suit that I had not worn since Betty's funeral. It hung a little loose on my frame now, but the lines were still sharp. I tied my tie with a Windsor knot and polished my shoes until I could see the reflection of a man who was done being a victim. I picked up the briefcase from the hallway. It contained the deed to the duplex. It contained the original blueprints I had drawn myself in 1992. And it contained the survey reports. It was 40 years of my life condensed into 5 pounds of paper. I walked out to my car. The house was quiet. Jalen and Skylar were still asleep upstairs. They were likely exhausted from their party and the effort of plotting my demise. I looked up at their darkened windows. Sleep well, children. Your wake-up call is coming. I drove downtown to the Loop. The office of Blackwood Holdings was located on the 45th floor of a glass tower that looked down on the city like a silent sentinel. I knew about Blackwood. In the construction industry, they were known as the Sharks. They did not buy homes to preserve history. They bought properties to tear them down and build high-density luxury condos. They were ruthless, they were efficient, and they were exactly what I needed. I did not have an appointment. I told the receptionist that I had a prime Hyde Park double-lot property for sale, and I was only speaking to a senior acquisition manager. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in a conference room that smelled of money and lemon zest. The man who walked in was named Mr. Sterling. He was younger than me, maybe 45. He wore a watch that cost more than my first car. He sat down and looked at the file I slid across the mahogany table. He opened the folder. He looked at the location. He looked at the zoning. He looked at the lot size. His eyebrows went up. "Mr. Gibson, this is a very desirable piece of real estate," he said. "Hyde Park inventory is at an all-time low. Why are you coming to us directly? You could put this on the open market and start a bidding war. You could get 20% more than whatever I can offer you today." I leaned forward. I clasped my hands on the table. "I am not looking for a bidding war," I said. "I am looking for a surgical extraction. I want to sell this property today, cash, as is, but I have conditions." Sterling closed the folder and leaned back. He looked intrigued. "Sharks always smell blood in the water." "What kind of conditions?" he asked. "First," I said, "the price. I will sell it to you for 20% below market value. That is an immediate equity gain for your firm of roughly $200,000. Sterling nodded slowly. "I am listening." Second, I continued. "Total secrecy. The sale will be recorded, but I want a strict non-disclosure agreement for 30 days. No for sale signs in the yard, no inspectors walking the perimeter in Blackwood jackets, no mail sent to the house. To the outside world and specifically to the tenants currently occupying the second floor, I am still the owner until I vacate the premises." Sterling tapped his pen on the table. "We can do that. We often buy properties quietly to avoid alerting competitors." "What is the third condition?" I took a breath. This was the most important part. This was the trap. "Third," I said, "I will vacate the property this coming Friday at noon. At 1 o'clock on that same Friday, I want your security team to enter the unit. I want a full hardwired security system installed, motion sensors, heat sensors, silent alarm connected directly to the police dispatch and your private security firm. I want the property secured as a vacant commercial asset." Sterling frowned. "Why the rush on security?" "Because," I said, keeping my voice even, "the tenants upstairs have a history of confused boundaries. I want to ensure that once I hand over the keys, my unit remains empty. If anyone enters that unit after I leave, I want them treated as trespassers. I want them arrested. Not warned. Arrested. Sterling looked at me for a long, long time. He was a smart man. He realized that there was a story here. He realized that this was not just a real estate transaction. It was a family dispute wrapped in a legal contract. But he was a businessman, and $200,000 in instant equity is a language that every businessman understands. He picked up his pen. "Mr. Gibson," he said, "if you can sign the title transfer today, we can have the funds in your account by Wednesday. Our security team is the best in the city. We protect our assets aggressively. If you hand us an empty unit on Friday, I guarantee you that by Friday night, it will be the most secure fortress in Chicago." I picked up the pen. The metal was cool against my skin. I thought about Betty. I thought about the garden she loved. I thought about the nursery we had painted yellow for Jalen. Then I thought about the wet ring on the Miles Davis album. I thought about the missing engagement ring. I thought about Skylar laughing in my backyard, planning to put me in a home. I signed my name, Major Marcus Gibson. It was done. I was no longer a homeowner. I was a tenant in my own history, and I had 5 days to pack. I shook hands with Sterling. His grip was firm. "Pleasure doing business with you," he said. "You have no idea," I replied. I drove back to Hyde Park in a daze. The deed was gone. The heavy briefcase was light now. I stopped at a diner and ordered coffee, but I could not drink it. My stomach was in knots. But they were good knots. They were the knots of a soldier before a battle. He knows he is going to win. I pulled into my driveway around 2 in the afternoon. There was a car parked behind my sedan. It was a sleek silver BMW convertible. I did not recognize it. I grabbed my briefcase and walked to the front door. As I reached for my keys, I heard voices coming from inside my unit. My blood ran cold. I had locked the door. I knew I had locked it. I pushed the door open. It was unlocked again. I stepped into the living room and stopped dead. Skylar was there. She was standing in the center of the room wearing a tight black dress and holding a tablet. Standing next to her was a man in a black turtleneck and designer glasses. He was holding a laser measuring device. A red dot was dancing across my wall. It moved across the framed photo of my army platoon. It moved across the painting of the bridge I had helped design in 1985. It settled on the wall that separated the kitchen from the living room. "That is a load-bearing wall," I said loudly. Skylar jumped. The man in the turtleneck dropped his laser. Skylar spun around, her face flushed with anger, not embarrassment. "Jesus, Major," she yelled. "You scared me to death. You cannot just sneak up on people like that." I walked into the room. I looked at the man. I looked at the laser. "I live here," I said. "I do not sneak. I enter." "Who is this?" Skylar rolled her eyes. "This is Pierre. He is an architect. He is a friend of a friend. He was just in the neighborhood and I wanted his opinion on something." Pierre looked uncomfortable. He stepped forward and extended a hand. "Nice to meet you, sir," he said. "Skylar was just showing me the space. She mentioned you were thinking about opening up the floor plan. It has great potential. If we take out this wall and install a steel beam, we could create a magnificent flow of light." I looked at Pierre's hand, but I did not shake it. I looked at Skylar. She was glaring at me, daring me to make a scene. She was daring me to be the confused old man she told everyone I was. She was measuring my house. I was gone for 4 hours and she was already bringing in architects to tear down my walls. She was not waiting for me to die. She was not waiting for me to move. She was erasing me in real time. A normal man would have screamed. A normal man would have thrown them out. But I was not a normal man anymore. I was a man with a check for $500,000 pending in his bank account. I was a man who had just sold the ground they were standing on to a corporation that ate people like Pierre for breakfast. I looked at the red laser dot on the wall. That wall was solid brick. It had stood for 90 years. Pierre wanted to knock it down. Skylar wanted to make it a studio. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was laughter. But it did not reach my mouth. It stayed inside, bubbling like hot tar. "Go ahead," I said. Skylar blinked. "What?" "Measure it," I said. I walked over to my leather chair and sat down. I placed my briefcase on the floor. I crossed my legs. "Measure everything. Check the ceiling height. Check the square footage. It is important to be precise. You do not want to make a mistake with the dimensions." Skylar looked at me with suspicion. She expected a fight. My compliance confused her. "Are you serious?" she asked. "I am an engineer, Skylar," I said calmly. "I appreciate good data. If you are going to plan a renovation, you should do it right. Do not let me stop you. Pretend I am not even here." Skylar exchanged a look with Pierre. She shrugged. "Okay then," she said. "See, Pierre, I told you he has his lucid moments. He knows the house needs work." Pierre hesitated, but Skylar pushed him. "Go on. Measure the windows." I sat there and watched. I watched the red dot dance over my life. I watched them discuss tearing out the hardwood floors I had sanded on my hands and knees. I watched them talk about painting the fireplace white. I watched them plan the destruction of my sanctuary, and for the first time in months, I smiled. It was a small smile. It barely touched my lips. Measure away, I thought. Measure the windows. Measure the walls. Make your plans. Draw your blueprints. Spend your money on designs that will never be built, because you are measuring a ghost. You are standing on a trap door and you are too busy looking at the ceiling to realize the floor is about to drop out. Pierre moved to the window. Skylar followed him, pointing out where her vanity station would go. I closed my eyes and listened to their voices. They sounded like distant buzzing flies. In 5 days, this room would be empty. In 5 days, those windows would have sensors on them that could detect a heartbeat. In 5 days, if Skylar walked through that door, she would not be greeted by a tired old man. She would be greeted by the Chicago Police Department. I opened my eyes and looked at Skylar one last time. "Enjoy the view," I whispered to myself. "It is the last time you will ever see it without handcuffs." I stood up and picked up my briefcase. "I am going to my room," I announced. "Try not to knock down any walls while I am napping." Skylar laughed. "Do not worry, Major. We are just planning. The demolition comes later." I walked down the hallway. Oh yes, I thought, the demolition is coming. But you are not the one holding the sledgehammer. I closed my bedroom door and locked it. I took off my suit jacket and hung it up. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the empty spot on the wall where the deed used to hang in a frame. The wall was bare, but I had never felt more protected. The countdown had begun. Tick-tock, Skylar, tick-tock. Tuesday evening was the moment I decided to pull the trigger on the deception. I chose dinner time because food has a way of disarming people. Jalen and Skylar were eating takeout sushi at the kitchen island. I had cooked a simple pot roast for myself. The smell of raw fish and soy sauce clashed with the smell of slow-cooked beef. It was a perfect metaphor for our living situation. We were in the same room, but we were existing in two different worlds. I cleared my throat. I waited for them to look up from their phones. Jalen was scrolling through sports scores. Skylar was editing a photo of her fingernails. "I have some news," I said. I put my fork down with a deliberate clink. Skylar did not even look up. "Did the cable bill go up again?" she asked, bored. "No," I said. "I have decided to take a trip. I am going to Florida." That got their attention. Skylar dropped her phone on the counter. Jalen stopped chewing. "Florida?" Jalen asked. "What is in Florida?" "My cousin Marcus." I lied. I had not spoken to Marcus in 20 years, but they did not know that. He has been asking me to come down and fish for a while. My knee is hurting with this damp Chicago weather. I think the heat will do me good. I am leaving this Friday. I will be gone for 2 weeks. I watched their faces closely. I watched the micro expressions that an engineer looks for when testing stress limits. First there was shock, then there was calculation, and finally there was pure, unadulterated greed. Skylar smiled. It was the widest, most genuine smile I had seen on her face in years. 2 weeks, she asked. "You are going to be gone for a full 14 days. "Yes," I said. "Maybe longer if the fishing is good." "That is amazing, Major," she said. Her voice went up an octave. "You really deserve a break. You have been so grumpy lately. You have been so stressed. The ocean air will be great for your mental health." I looked at Jalen. He looked relieved. He looked like a man who had just been told his execution was postponed. "Yeah, Dad, that sounds great," he said. "Do not worry about the house. We will hold down the fort." "I am sure you will," I said. I took a sip of water to hide the disgust on my face. I finished my dinner quickly. I told them I needed to start organizing my things. As I walked down the hallway to my bedroom, I heard them whispering. "Did you hear that?" Skylar hissed. 2 weeks. Jalen, that is perfect. We can do the walkthrough with the contractor while he is gone. We can finally host that launch party for my blog without him lurking in the background. I closed my bedroom door. I locked it. I leaned against the wood and let out a long breath. They had taken the bait. Now I had to build the trap. The next 3 days were a blur of calculated movement. I had to empty the house of its value without making it look empty. I had to create a stage set. I had to build a facade that would fool them for exactly 48 hours. I waited until they left for work in the morning. Skylar usually went to a yoga studio and then to coffee shops to work on her brand. Jalen went to his sales office downtown. From 9 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon, the house was mine. I started with the documents. I shredded everything that had my name on it. Bank statements, old tax returns, medical records. I filled 5 trash bags with shredded paper and drove them to a public dump 3 towns over. I did not want them finding a single scrap of paper in the recycling bin. Then came the valuables. I hired a private moving van to come to the alley behind the house. It was an unmarked white truck. The driver was a man named Tony, who I had worked with on construction sites for years. He knew how to keep his mouth shut. We moved the sterling silver, we moved the antique clock collection, we moved the paintings Betty had collected over the years, but I could not leave the walls bare. Skylar would notice. If the house looked too empty, she might get suspicious and check the locks or look closer at the details. I needed the house to look lived in, but I needed the things inside to be worthless. I went to a thrift store on the south side. I bought cheap generic replacements. I bought a landscape painting for $5 to replace the oil painting of the harbor. I bought a scratched glass vase to replace the Waterford crystal one. I bought a stack of old magazines to put on the coffee table where my architectural journals used to be. The furniture was the hardest part. I could not move the sofa or the dining table without them noticing, so I decided to use their own laziness against them. I went to the hardware store and bought heavy plastic drop cloths. I covered the leather sofa. I covered the dining table. I covered the grand piano. When Skylar came home on Wednesday evening, she saw the plastic covers. "What is with the plastic?" she asked, wrinkling her nose. "It looks like a murder scene in here." "I am closing up the house," I said. "Dust covers. I do not want dust settling on the furniture while I am gone. And I do not want any spills if you decide to have guests." Skylar rolled her eyes, but she bought it. In her mind, it made sense that a fussy old man would cover his precious furniture. She did not know that under the plastic on the armchair, I had swapped the seat cushion with a bag of old clothes to keep the shape while I shipped the real cushion to storage. She did not know that the piano was locked and I had taken the key. By Thursday night, the transformation was complete. My unit looked normal from a distance, but if you looked close, it was a shell. The drawers were empty. The cabinets were bare. The soul of the house was gone. I sat in my bedroom that last night. I had packed my clothes into 2 suitcases. I had my passport. I had the check from Blackwood Holdings deposited in a new bank account at a different bank. I looked around the room. I had stripped the bed. I had taken down the photos of Betty. I replaced them with generic stock photos in cheap frames I found at the dollar store. It was strange to ghost your own life. It was strange to erase 40 years of history in 3 days. But every time I felt a pang of sadness, I thought about the conversation in the backyard. I thought about the words assisted living. I thought about the dumpster they promised to fill with my life, and the sadness turned into steel. Friday morning arrived. My flight to Florida was imaginary, but my departure was very real. I was in the kitchen drinking my last cup of coffee. I was using a paper cup because I had packed all the mugs. Skylar came down the stairs. She was wearing a silk robe and she was already on her phone. She looked up and saw me. She smiled. It was the smile of a predator watching its prey limp away. "So today is the big day," she said. "What time do you leave?" "Noon," I said. "The taxi is coming at 12 sharp. "Perfect," she said. She tapped on her screen. "I am just finalizing the guest list for tonight. Since you are going to be gone, I thought I would have a few friends over. Just a small housewarming. You know, to bring good energy into the space." A housewarming. She was calling it a housewarming before I had even walked out the door. She was not just stepping over my grave. She was dancing on it. "That sounds nice," I said. My voice was flat. "Hey, Major," she said. "Since you are leaving, can we use the big fridge downstairs for drinks? The one upstairs is full of food." "Use whatever you want," I said. "It makes no difference to me." She clapped her hands together. "Thanks, Major. You are the best. Have fun in Florida. Say hi to your cousin for me." She did not know my cousin's name. She did not care. She turned around and walked back up the stairs. I heard her voice floating down. Jalen, he said, yes, we can use the whole downstairs. Text everyone, tell them to come at 8. It is going to be epic. I stood in the kitchen and looked at the clock. It was 11:30. I picked up my paper cup and walked to the sink. I rinsed it out and threw it in the trash. I did a final walkthrough. I walked into the living room. The plastic covers rustled in the draft from the vent. The fake painting on the wall looked crooked. The cheap magazines on the table looked cluttered. It was ugly. It was hollow. It was perfect. I walked to the front door. My suitcases were waiting. I pulled my phone out and sent a text message to Mr. Sterling at Blackwood Holdings. Message read, I am leaving at 12. The unit is yours. Security team is cleared to enter at 1. Make it tight. Mr. Sterling replied instantly. Message read, understood, Mr. Gibson. Transfer is complete. Enjoy your retirement. I put the phone in my pocket. I heard a car honk outside. It was my taxi. I did not look back at the stairs. I did not say goodbye to Jalen. I had said my goodbyes to the son I thought I had years ago. The man upstairs was a stranger. I opened the front door and stepped out into the cool Chicago air. The sun was shining. The birds were singing. I walked down the path Betty and I had laid. I opened the gate. I put my suitcases in the trunk of the taxi. Where to, sir? The driver asked. I looked back at the house one last time. I saw the curtain in the upstairs window move. Skylar was watching. She was making sure I was really going. I got into the back seat. Take me to the O'Hare Airport, I said loudly so the neighbors could hear. But once we were around the corner and out of sight, I leaned forward. Actually, change of plans, I said. Take me to the north side, the Lakeview Apartments. The driver shrugged. You are the boss. I sat back and watched the city pass by. Skylar was planning a party. She was inviting her friends to celebrate her victory. She was going to drink wine in my living room and laugh about how easy it was to push the old man out. She had no idea that she was not throwing a party. She was walking into a cage. And at 1 o'clock, the door to that cage was going to slam shut. I closed my eyes and listened to the rhythm of the tires on the pavement. Tick-tock, Skylar. Tick-tock. The moment had arrived. I stood in the foyer of the home I had built with my own hands. My 2 suitcases were sitting on the porch. The taxi was idling at the curb, emitting a cloud of white exhaust into the crisp Chicago air. It was 12 o'clock. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a heavy ring of keys. There were 4 keys on it, the big brass one for the front deadlock, the silver one for the back door, the small square one for the mailbox, and the key to the garage. They looked real. They felt real. I had even taken the time to scratch the brass one against a brick to make it look worn and used. But they were not real. They were copies of keys to locks that I had changed 10 years ago and kept in a junk drawer. They would slide into the cylinders perfectly, but they would not turn, not even a fraction of an inch. Jalen and Skylar were standing at the bottom of the stairs. Skylar was vibrating with energy. She was practically bouncing on the balls of her feet. She was wearing a new outfit, a sharp white blazer and jeans, like she was ready to host a television show. Jalen stood a step behind her, looking at his shoes. I looked at my son. I wanted to see some regret in his eyes. I wanted to see him step forward and say, Dad, do not go. I wanted him to say, Dad, we will take care of your things. But he did not. He just shuffled his feet. I held out the keys. The metal jingled in the silence of the hallway. Jalen, I said. My voice was low and serious. These are the keys to my kingdom. Everything I own is behind these doors. My records, my mother's Bible, the photos of your childhood. I paused. I wanted the weight of the words to sink in. I am trusting you, I continued. I am trusting you to watch over this place while I am gone. Do not let anyone in who does not belong here. Keep the doors locked. Keep the family safe. Jalen reached out and took the keys. His hand was warm and clammy. He closed his fingers around the cold metal. I promise, Dad, he said. He finally looked up at me, but his eyes were glassy. You do not have to worry about a thing. I will check on the place every day. Nobody is going to touch your stuff. It was a lie. It was a bald-faced lie delivered with the sincerity of a used car salesman. He was holding the keys to my destruction, and he was promising me safety. I looked at Skylar. She was staring at Jalen's hand. She was staring at the keys like a starving dog stares at a bone. "Have a safe trip, Major," she said quickly. "Do not worry about us. We will be fine. Just relax and catch some big fish." I nodded. I did not trust myself to speak to her. If I opened my mouth, I might tell her exactly what I thought of her. I might warn her about the trap. And I could not do that. She had earned what was coming. I picked up my hat and placed it on my head. I adjusted the brim. "Goodbye," I said. I turned my back on them. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. I walked out the door and down the steps. I did not look back at the house. I focused on the cracks in the sidewalk. I focused on the yellow taxi. I got into the back seat. The leather was cold. The car smelled of pine air freshener and old cigarettes. "O'Hare Airport," I told the driver loudly. The car pulled away. I watched the house recede in the side mirror. I saw the front door close. As soon as we turned the corner, I slumped against the seat. The adrenaline that had been holding me up drained away, leaving me exhausted. "Take me to the Lakeview Apartments on the north side," I told the driver quietly. He looked at me in the rearview mirror, but he did not ask questions. He just flipped the meter and turned the wheel. I pulled my tablet out of my carry-on bag. I had a data plan connected to it. I opened the app for the hidden camera I had installed in the hallway light fixture the day before. The feed loaded. The image was crisp and clear in high definition. I saw the hallway I had just left. It was empty. The timestamp read 12:05. I watched. I waited. I did not have to wait long. At 12:08, the door to the upstairs unit flew open. Skylar came running down the stairs. She was not walking. She was running. Jalen was trailing behind her, looking anxious. She had the keys in her hand. She had taken them from Jalen. She marched straight to my front door. She did not knock. She did not hesitate. She jammed the brass key into the lock. I watched on the small screen as she tried to turn it. She twisted her wrist. Nothing happened. She jiggled the key. She pulled it out and shoved it back in. She used both hands, trying to force the mechanism to turn. "What is wrong with this thing?" she yelled. Her voice was tinny through the tablet speakers, but the anger was unmistakable. "Maybe it is the wrong key," Jalen said from behind her. "Maybe he gave us the back door key by mistake." Skylar pulled the key out and tried the silver one. It did not fit. She tried the square one. It was too small. She slammed her hand against the wood of the door. "He did this on purpose," she screamed. "That senile old bat gave us the wrong keys. He probably took the real ones with him. God, he is so selfish." She turned to Jalen. Her face was contorted with rage. This was not the sweet daughter-in-law who had wished me a safe trip 3 minutes ago. This was a monster. "Call him," she ordered. "Call him right now and tell him to turn around and bring the keys back." Jalen pulled out his phone. I watched my own phone sitting on the seat next to me. It lit up. Jalen calling. I let it ring. I watched it vibrate. Once, twice, 3 times. Then it went to voicemail. "He is not answering," Jalen said. "He must be in the tunnel or something." Skylar let out a growl of frustration. "We do not have time for this, Jalen. The caterers are coming at 4. The guests are coming at 8. I promised everyone the downstairs lounge. I cannot host a high-end cocktail party in our cramped apartment upstairs." She paced back and forth in the hallway. She looked like a caged tiger. Then she stopped. She looked at the door. She looked at her watch. 12:12. It had been exactly 7 minutes since I left. 7 minutes. That was how long it took for her to decide to break into my home. "Call the locksmith," she said. Jalen's eyes went wide. "Skylar, we cannot do that. That is breaking and entering. Dad will kill us if he finds out we drilled his locks. He is in Florida," Skylar shouted. "He is going to be gone for 2 weeks. We will drill the lock, replace the cylinder, and when he comes back, we will just tell him the old lock jammed and we fixed it for him as a favor. He is old, Jalen. He will believe anything we tell him." Jalen hesitated. He looked at the door. He looked at his wife. "Do it, Jalen," she hissed. "Or do you want to explain to my friends why the party is canceled? Do you want to explain to your wife why you are such a useless coward?" Jalen flinched. He looked defeated. "Fine," he whispered. Skylar grabbed her phone. She typed furiously. "I am calling the guy we used when we locked ourselves out of the car," she said. "He is fast and he takes cash." I sat in the taxi and watched. My heart was pounding, but it was a cold, steady rhythm. This was it. This was the proof. If she had waited a day, I might have felt a shred of guilt. If she had called me and left a message asking for permission, I might have hesitated. But she did not. She waited 7 minutes. She was willing to drill through a deadbolt to get what she wanted. She was not just greedy, she was entitled to the point of criminality. I watched as she made the call. I heard her voice turn sweet and fake again. "Hi, yes, this is Skylar Gibson. I am at 442 Oak Street. My husband and I just stepped out to grab the mail and the door slammed shut behind us. We are locked out. Yes, it is an emergency. Can you come now? Great, 20 minutes. We will pay double for rush service. Thanks." She hung up and smiled at Jalen. "See? Problem solved." She leaned against my door. She claimed it. She owned it. I turned off the tablet. I did not need to see anymore. The taxi pulled up to the curb of the Lakeview Apartments. It was a tall, modern building with a doorman. It was sterile and cold, but it was safe. I paid the driver and stepped out. I checked my watch. 12:30. The locksmith would arrive at 12:40. He would drill the lock. They would be inside by 1 o'clock. At exactly 1 o'clock, the security team from Blackwood Holdings was scheduled to arrive to take possession of the unit. Skylar thought she was breaking into her father-in-law's apartment to throw a party. She was about to break into a corporate asset protected by a billion-dollar legal team. She thought she had solved the problem. She had just created a problem that money could not fix. I walked into the lobby of my temporary home. I felt light. The burden of the house was gone. The burden of hoping my son would change was gone. I had given them a test, a simple test. Here are the keys. Keep it safe. They had failed before the exhaust from my taxi had even dissipated. I walked to the elevator. I pressed the button for the 10th floor. Go ahead, Skylar, I thought. Drill the lock. Open the door. You are not opening a party venue. You are opening Pandora's box. And I am going to have the best seat in the house to watch the demons come out. I sat on the beige sofa of my new apartment on the 10th floor of the Lakeview building. It was a sterile place. The walls were painted a generic shade of white that smelled of industrial latex. The carpet was a tight gray loop that felt rough under my socks. It was the complete opposite of the home I had spent 40 years building. My old home had hardwood floors that creaked with history and walls that held the warmth of 1,000 family dinners. This place felt like a waiting room. But for the first time in months, I felt safe. I felt the tension in my shoulders begin to uncoil. I placed my tablet on the glass coffee table and poured myself a glass of Merlot. It was a bottle Betty and I had been saving for our 50th anniversary. I decided to open it tonight. Tonight was an anniversary of sorts. It was the anniversary of the end of my life as a father and the beginning of my life as a free man. I opened the security app on my tablet. The screen flickered to life. The camera I had hidden in the crown molding of the living room gave me a panoramic view of the destruction. It was 8:30 in the evening. The party was in full swing. My living room was packed with bodies. There must have been 50 people squeezed into the space. I did not recognize a single face. These were not neighbors. These were not family friends. These were strangers invited to fill the void of Skylar's insecurity. The air in the room on the screen looked thick with smoke and body heat. I could see the haze drifting past the camera lens. I watched Skylar moving through the crowd. She was the queen of a stolen castle. She was wearing a gold dress that shimmered under the lights she had set up. She looked triumphant. She was holding a wine glass filled with red liquid and she was gesturing wildly. I turned up the volume on the tablet. The audio was tinny, but I could hear her voice cutting through the thumping bass of the electronic music she was blasting. "Welcome to the new headquarters," she shouted, raising her glass high. The crowd cheered. They raised their glasses to a theft they thought was a victory. I zoomed in on the feed. I wanted to see the details. I wanted to see exactly how much respect they had for my property. I saw a man with heavy boots standing on my Persian rug. He was grinding a cigarette butt into the fabric. My stomach tightened. That rug was one of the few things I had left behind because it was too large to move quickly. I had told myself it was just a rug, but seeing it treated like an ashtray made my blood boil. But then I took a breath. I reminded myself that the rug belonged to Blackwood Holdings now. It was their asset. It was their loss. I watched a group of 3 young women sitting on the sofa. They had pulled the plastic dust covers off that I had so carefully placed. They were sitting directly on the cushions, laughing and spilling drinks. One of them was eating a slice of pizza and wiping her greasy hands on the armrest. I recognized the sofa. It was the one I had bought at the Goodwill for $40 to replace my Italian leather set. I watched them ruin it and I felt a cold satisfaction. They thought they were destroying something precious. They thought they were hurting me by soiling my expensive furniture. They had no idea they were sitting on trash. A man with a man bun and a flannel shirt was leaning against the fireplace. He picked up the ceramic vase I had bought at the thrift store for $3. He held it up to the light, inspecting it with a sneer. I heard him laugh. "Check this out," he yelled to a woman standing next to him. "This thing is hideous. It looks like something my grandma would buy at a garage sale." Skylar walked over. She did not defend my taste. She did not tell him to be careful. She laughed with him. She put her hand on his arm and leaned in. "Oh God, I know," she said loudly. "Major has the worst taste. He is stuck in the last century. We are going to trash all of this junk tomorrow. Consider this the farewell tour for the tacky decor." The man pretended to drop the vase. He caught it at the last second. They both doubled over laughing. Then he actually dropped it. It hit the hearth and shattered into a dozen pieces. "Oops," he said, but he was smiling. Skylar clapped her hands. "One less thing to carry to the dumpster," she said. I sat in my new apartment and took a sip of wine. A week ago, that sight would have stopped my heart. A week ago, I would have been thinking about the history of that vase. I would have been hurt that my daughter-in-law thought my life was ugly. But tonight, I felt nothing, absolutely nothing, because I knew that vase was garbage. The real vase. The crystal one Betty had loved was safely wrapped in bubble wrap in a storage unit 5 miles away. They were mocking a ghost. They were destroying a decoy. It proved everything I needed to know. They did not hate my things. They hated me. They hated my presence. They hated that I existed in a space they wanted to consume. I looked for my son in the crowd. I scanned the room until I found him standing near the kitchen. He was drinking straight from a bottle of beer. He looked sweaty. He looked nervous. Every time the front door opened, he flinched. He kept looking towards the hallway as if he expected me to burst through the door with my suitcase and demand an explanation. He was terrified that his father would come home early and catch him in his betrayal. He did not know that his father was never coming home. He did not know that the man who raised him was sitting 10 miles away, watching him drown in his own cowardice. Jalen was not enjoying the party. He was enduring it. He was realizing that he was no longer the man of the house. He was just another prop in Skylar's show. He looked small. He looked weak. And for a moment I felt a pang of pity for him. But then I remembered the keys. I remembered the lie in the hallway. I remembered how he handed over the keys to his wife 7 minutes after I left. The pity evaporated. He had made his choice. The party continued to escalate. Someone had brought a marker, and they were drawing on the portrait of the landscape I had hung over the mantel. They were drawing mustaches on the trees. Skylar thought it was hilarious. She was taking selfies with the defaced painting. "This is art," she screamed. "This is modern art." I watched them desecrate my sanctuary. I watched them dance on the floors I had sanded. I watched them spit on the memory of the life I had lived there. And with every insult, with every broken piece of cheap pottery, my resolve hardened like concrete. I checked the time on the tablet. It was 11 o'clock. The party was winding down, but the guests showed no sign of leaving. They were settling in. They were getting comfortable. Some were passing out on the floor. Others were making out in the corners. They treated the house like a conquered territory. Good, I thought. Get comfortable. Make yourselves at home. Because the landlord is about to change, and the new landlord does not tolerate overdue rent. I finished my wine. I swirled the red liquid in the bottom of the glass. It looked like blood. Skylar climbed onto the coffee table. She was drunk on power and cheap champagne. She whistled to get everyone's attention. "Listen up, everyone," she screamed. The music lowered slightly. "I just want to say thank you for coming to celebrate our new beginning. It has been a long time coming, but we finally have the space we deserve. To the future." The crowd roared. "To the future," they echoed. I raised my glass to the screen. "To the future," I whispered. But my toast was different. Their future was a fantasy. My future was a contract, and the ink on that contract was already dry. They were celebrating a victory in a war they did not even know they were fighting. They were celebrating in a cage that was slowly locking around them. I watched Skylar stumble off the table. She almost fell, but Jalen caught her. She pushed him away. She did not need him anymore. She had the house. She had the space. She had the audience. I turned off the tablet. I did not need to see anymore. I knew how this movie ended. I knew what happened when people built their happiness on the suffering of others. The foundation always cracks. I stood up and walked to the window of my new apartment. I looked out at the lights of Chicago. Somewhere down there in the grid of gold and amber, my old life was being dismantled. But up here in the dark, I was building a fortress. I went to the bedroom and laid down on the new mattress. It was firm, it was clean. I closed my eyes. I imagined Skylar sleeping in my house tonight. I imagined her dreaming of her studio and her renovation. I wondered if she would hear the silence. I wondered if she would feel the eyes of the sensors that would be installed tomorrow. Sleep tight, Skylar. The alarm is set, and silence is the loudest sound you will ever hear. Saturday morning broke over Chicago with a bleary gray light that matched the mood inside my former home. From the safety of my new apartment on the 10th floor, I watched the aftermath of the party on my tablet screen. The living room looked like a war zone. There were red plastic cups crushed into the carpet. There were empty wine bottles lined up on the mantel like trophies of their disrespect. A half-eaten slice of pizza was face down on the leather armchair I had covered with plastic. Even through the grainy video feed, I could almost smell the stale beer and the lingering scent of cheap perfume. Skylar was the first to emerge from the upstairs unit. It was 10 in the morning. She walked down the stairs wearing oversized sunglasses and a silk robe that dragged on the floor. She looked hungover. She moved slowly, holding her head as if it were made of fragile glass. She stood in the middle of the living room and surveyed the mess. A normal person would feel shame. A normal person would look at the destruction of their father-in-law's home and feel a pang of guilt. Skylar just yawned. She kicked a red cup out of her way and walked to the kitchen to find water. I watched her open the refrigerator. She stood there for a long time, letting the cold air wash over her. She was the queen of the castle now. She had survived the night. She had claimed the territory. She probably thought the hard part was over. She probably thought that now she just had to wait for the contractor to come and knock down the walls. She did not know that the clock was ticking. At 10:30, Jalen came down. He looked worse than she did. He was wearing the same clothes he had on the night before. He looked guilty. He picked up a trash bag and started half-heartedly throwing cups away. "Leave it," Skylar snapped. Her voice was raspy. "We can hire a cleaning crew on Monday. Major left us that emergency cash in the kitchen drawer, remember? We will use that." I clenched my jaw. That cash was for emergencies. It was for a burst pipe or a broken window. To Skylar, it was just another resource to exploit. They left the house at 11. Skylar had a brunch appointment with her influencer friends to debrief about the party. Jalen had to go to the office to catch up on paperwork he had neglected. They walked out the front door, leaving the mess behind them. They locked the deadbolt with the new key the locksmith had given them. As soon as their car pulled away from the curb, another vehicle pulled up. It was a black van with no markings. It looked like a utility vehicle, but I knew better. It was the security detail from Blackwood Holdings. I watched on the camera as 4 men in gray coveralls got out. They moved with a precision that I admired. They did not look like contractors. They looked like soldiers. They had the code to the garage keypad which I had provided to Mr. Sterling. They entered through the back, avoiding the front door entirely. For the next 4 hours, I watched a masterclass in fortification. These men were not installing a home security system you buy at a big box store. They were installing a commercial-grade perimeter defense system. I watched them peel back the molding around the windows to install hidden magnetic sensors. I watched them drill into the floorboards near the entrances to place pressure sensors. They worked silently. They did not play music. They did not take breaks. They were securing an asset worth millions of dollars. The most important part of the installation was the motion detectors. They placed them high in the corners of every room, painted to match the walls perfectly. These were not the kind of sensors that blink red when they see you. These were passive infrared sensors. They were invisible. They were silent. That was the key. A silent alarm. When a normal burglar alarm goes off, it screams. It scares the intruder away. It gives them a chance to run. A silent alarm is a trap. It detects the intruder and sends a signal instantly to the police and the security firm. The intruder continues their business thinking they are safe. They take their time, they dig deeper, and while they are digging, the police are surrounding the building. I wanted Skylar to feel safe. I wanted her to think she had gotten away with it. I wanted her to be deep inside the house when the net closed. By 3 in the afternoon, the team was finished. One of the men pulled out a tablet and ran a diagnostic test. I could not see his screen, but I saw him nod. He spoke into a radio. System green, asset secured. They packed up their tools. They cleaned up every speck of dust they had created. They left the party mess exactly as they found it. If Skylar walked in, she would not notice a thing. The house looked exactly the same, but the air inside had changed. It was no longer a home. It was a vault, and the door was open. The team left at 3:15. Skylar and Jalen returned at 4. I watched them walk back into the house. They were laughing. The brunch mimosas had evidently improved Skylar's mood. She kicked off her heels and flopped onto the sofa, the same sofa that was now watched by 3 invisible eyes. Jalen went to the kitchen to make coffee. He looked more relaxed. He thought the danger had passed. He thought his father was safely in Florida fishing on a pier. I sat in my apartment and looked at the phone in my hand. It was time to set the bait. I knew Skylar. I knew her greed was a gravitational force. She had taken the house, she had taken the furniture, but that was not liquid cash. Renovation costs money. Her lifestyle cost money. And she was always hungry for more. I needed a reason for her to break into the unit tonight. Not tomorrow, not next week, tonight. While the security system was fresh, while the police were on high alert for the new high-value asset in the neighborhood. I typed a text message to Jalen. I composed it carefully. I used the voice of a forgetful, worried old man. Jalen, I wrote, I am so sorry to bother you. I just arrived in Florida, but I realized I made a terrible mistake. I left the folder with my life insurance policy in the bottom drawer of my desk. It is the big policy, the one for $1 million. I paused. I let the number sit there on the screen. $1 million. It was a lie. My policy was much smaller and it was safely in a safety deposit box. But they did not know that. I continued typing. Please do not touch it. It has all my social security information and the beneficiary details inside. I do not want it getting lost in the mess. I will ask my friend Tony to come by next week to pick it up and put it in his safe. Just make sure nobody goes into the study until then. Love, Dad. I read it over. It was perfect. It had everything. The high stakes, the urgency, the restriction. Telling Skylar not to touch something was like telling a moth not to touch a flame. And telling her that $1 million document was sitting unguarded in a drawer was like ringing a dinner bell. I pressed send. I watched the screen of my tablet. I had a view of the kitchen where Jalen had left his phone on the counter while he made coffee. The phone lit up. It vibrated against the granite. Jalen was busy rinsing a mug. He did not hear it, but Skylar did. She was in the living room, but her ears were tuned to the frequency of notifications. She stood up. She walked into the kitchen. Is that your phone? She asked. Yeah, Jalen said. Can you check it? It is probably work. Skylar picked up the phone. I watched her face. The camera quality was good enough to see the transformation. At first she looked bored. She swiped the screen. She read the preview of the message. Then she froze. Her eyes went wide. She stood absolutely still for 3 seconds. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. $1 million. Beneficiary details. She did not hand the phone to Jalen. She did not read the message out loud. She looked at Jalen's back. He was still scrubbing the mug, oblivious to the fact that his wife was currently calculating the value of his father's death. Oh, it is nothing, Skylar said. Her voice was too casual. Just a spam text about car warranty. She deleted the message. I sat back in my chair and let out a breath I did not know I was holding. She deleted it. She did not want Jalen to know. She wanted that information for herself. She wanted to see who the beneficiary was. She wanted to see if she could change it, or maybe she just wanted to steal the policy and hold it hostage. She put the phone back on the counter, face down. Hey, babe, she said, walking up behind Jalen and wrapping her arms around his waist. You look tired. Why don't you go upstairs and take a nap? I will clean up down here for a bit. Jalen turned around and smiled. He looked relieved. Really, you would do that? Of course, Skylar said. She kissed him on the cheek. It was the kiss of Judas. Go rest. I just want to organize some things before the cleaners come on Monday. Jalen hugged her. Thanks, Sky. You are the best. He walked out of the kitchen and headed for the stairs. I watched Skylar as she listened to his footsteps fading away. As soon as the door upstairs clicked shut, her smile vanished. She turned and looked down the hallway towards my study. Her eyes were shining. It was not love. It was not gratitude. It was the cold, hard shine of avarice. She looked like a pirate who had just found a map to buried treasure. She thought she was alone. She thought the only thing between her and that $1 million policy was a wooden door and a simple lock. She walked into the living room. She did not start cleaning. She paced back and forth. She was waiting. She was waiting for Jalen to fall asleep. She was waiting for the sun to go down. I took a sip of water. My hand was steady. The bait was taken. The hook was set. Skylar was going to wait until the middle of the night. She wanted to do this in the dark. She wanted to feel the thrill of the heist. She did not know that the darkness was already full of eyes. I checked the security app again. The system status bar was a solid, comforting green. Silent alarm armed. Sensors active. I looked at Skylar one last time. She was biting her nail, looking at the study door with a hunger that was almost frightening. "Go ahead, Skylar," I whispered. "Wait for the dark. The police are not coming for a noise complaint tonight. They are coming for a felony, and you are going to hand-deliver yourself to them on a silver platter." I turned off the tablet screen, but I did not turn off the device. I needed it fully charged for the main event. I went to the kitchen of my new apartment and made a sandwich. I needed my strength. It was going to be a long night, and I did not want to miss a single second of the show. The darkness in my new apartment was heavy and silent. I sat in the high-back chair facing the window, but my eyes were not on the city lights. They were fixed on the glowing screen of my tablet. The time was 2:45 in the morning. This is the hour when the city sleeps. It is the hour when the honest people are resting and the predators come out to feed. I had a pot of black coffee sitting on the table next to me, but I did not need the caffeine to stay awake. The adrenaline coursing through my veins was more potent than any espresso. I was watching the feed from the hallway camera of my old duplex. The image was grainy in the low light of the corridor, but it was clear enough to see the door to my unit. It stood there like a mouth waiting to swallow anyone foolish enough to enter. Upstairs inside the apartment that my son and his wife shared, I knew exactly what was happening. I did not have cameras inside their bedroom, but I knew the script. I knew Skylar. I knew that the text message about the $1 million policy was burning a hole in her mind. She would be tossing and turning. She would be staring at the ceiling, calculating how many designer handbags and first-class flights $1 million could buy. She would be poking Jalen. She would be whispering in his ear. She would be telling him that his father was old and forgetful. She would be telling him that the policy was just sitting there in a drawer gathering dust. I imagined the conversation. "Jalen, go get it," she would say. "Just run downstairs and grab the folder. He will never know. We will just keep it safe for him." But Jalen was a coward. I knew my son. He had the greed, but he lacked the spine. He would be terrified of the dark. He would be terrified of the shadows in his father's house. He would refuse. He would pull the covers over his head, and that refusal would be the spark. That refusal would force Skylar to do the dirty work herself. At 2:58, the door to the upstairs unit opened. I leaned forward in my chair. "Here we go." Skylar stepped out into the hallway. She was wearing a dark, oversized hoodie and sweatpants. She looked ridiculous. She looked like a teenager trying to sneak out to a party, but her eyes were not innocent. Even in the dim light, I could see the tension in her jaw. She was holding a large canvas tote bag in one hand. It was the kind of bag you take to the grocery store, but tonight it was meant for grand larceny. In her other hand, she held a heavy-duty flashlight. She did not turn it on yet. She did not want to alert the neighbors. She stopped at the top of the stairs and looked back at her own door. Jalen was not with her. He had stayed behind. He was probably sitting on the edge of his bed, biting his fingernails, waiting for his wife to bring back the loot. He was an accessory to the crime, but he was too weak to commit it. Skylar crept down the stairs. She moved slowly, testing each step for squeaks. She reached the landing in front of my door. She stood there for a moment, breathing hard. I could see her chest rising and falling. This was the moment of truth. This was the moment where she could turn around. She could go back upstairs. She could go back to sleep and wake up a free woman. She could choose to respect the boundaries of the man who had given her a roof over her head for 3 years. But greed is a powerful drug. It overrides logic. It overrides morality. It overrides survival instincts. Skylar reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. She opened it and took out a set of tension wrenches and a pick gun. My stomach turned. She had come prepared. She had bought lock-picking tools. She had planned this. This was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was a calculated assault on my property. She knelt down in front of the deadbolt, the same deadbolt she had paid a locksmith to replace just 12 hours earlier. The irony was thick enough to choke on. She was breaking into a lock that she technically owned, but the door it secured belonged to a corporation that did not know her name. I watched her work. She was clumsy. She fumbled with the tools. She cursed under her breath. Come on, she whispered. The microphone on the camera picked up her frustration. I sipped my coffee. Take your time, Skylar. The sensors are patient. Click. The sound was sharp in the silence. The lock turned. Skylar let out a sigh of relief. She put the tools back in her pocket. She grabbed the doorknob. She turned it. She pushed. The door to Unit A swung open. Darkness spilled out from the living room. It was absolute blackness inside. I had closed all the blinds before I left. Skylar paused on the threshold. She raised her flashlight. She clicked it on. A beam of white light cut through the dark. It swept across the floor. It swept across the plastic-covered furniture. It swept across the empty walls. She took a step. 1 foot inside. Nothing happened. She took another step. 2 feet inside. Still nothing. No sirens. No bells. No barking dogs. Skylar relaxed. I saw her shoulders drop. She thought she was safe. She thought the silence meant she was undetected. She thought the house was just a sleeping beast that she could tiptoe around. She stepped fully into the foyer and closed the door behind her. She was inside. On the screen of my tablet, a small icon in the top right corner changed color. It went from a steady green to a pulsing red. Verified intrusion. Zone 1. Entryway. I looked at my phone. A notification appeared instantly. It was from the Blackwood Security Command Center. Alert. Motion detected. Heat signature confirmed. Silent alarm active. Police dispatch notified. Priority 1. I did not smile. I did not cheer. I felt a deep, cold sadness. It was the sadness of a structural engineer watching a bridge collapse because the materials were flawed. Skylar was flawed. She was broken. And now she was going to be destroyed. Inside the house, Skylar was moving deeper into the trap. The camera in the hallway was no longer useful, so I switched to the feed from the living room sensor. This camera was infrared. It showed the room in shades of gray and white. Skylar was a bright white figure moving through a gray world. She walked past the covered sofa. She did not look at it. She was focused. She was heading straight for the hallway that led to my study. She was heading for the desk where I told her the money was. She was moving with confidence now. The silence emboldened her. She swung the flashlight around carelessly. She was the master of the house. She was thinking about the $1 million. She was probably already spending it in her head. She reached the door to the study. It was locked. I had locked it before I left, not to keep her out, but to slow her down, to keep her in the house longer, to give the police time to arrive. She jiggled the handle. Locked. Damn it, she hissed. She reached into her pocket for her tools again. I looked at the time. 3:05. The police precinct was 6 blocks away. At 3 in the morning with no traffic, a squad car could make that trip in 4 minutes. Blackwood Holdings paid a premium for security. When their alarm went off, it did not go into a queue. It went to the top of the list. They had flagged the property as a high-value commercial asset with a potential for armed robbery because of the neighborhood. The dispatch would be sending units with lights and sirens cut to approach silently. Skylar was picking the lock on the study door. She was struggling. Her hands were shaking now. Not from fear, but from anticipation. She was so close to the prize. She did not know that the prize did not exist. There was no policy in the drawer. There was only a single sheet of paper, a letter I had written to her. A letter she would never get to read because she would be in handcuffs before she could turn on the desk lamp. The lock on the study door clicked. "Gotcha," she whispered. She pushed the door open and stepped into the study. The sensor in the study triggered. Verified intrusion. Zone 3. South office. The red light on my tablet pulsed faster. The trap was fully sprung. She was deep in the belly of the beast. There was only one way out, and that exit was about to be blocked by the Chicago Police Department. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked in the direction of Hyde Park. I could not see the house from here, but I could see the streets. Far in the distance, I saw a flicker of blue lights. They were not using their sirens. They were coming in stealth mode, just like the alarm. I looked back at the screen. Skylar was at my desk. She was pulling the drawers open. She was dumping the contents onto the floor. She was frantic. "Where is it?" she muttered. "Where is the damn money?" She found the envelope I had left, the one labeled insurance. She ripped it open. She pulled out the paper. She shined her flashlight on it. I zoomed in. I watched her read the first line. It did not say $1 million. It said, "You are trespassing on private corporate property." Skylar froze. She lowered the paper. She looked around the room. For the first time, she looked scared. She realized something was wrong. The silence of the house suddenly felt heavy. It felt oppressive. It felt like the air before a thunderstorm. She turned towards the door. She wanted to run. Her instinct told her to flee, but it was too late. On the audio feed from the front of the house, I heard the sound of tires screeching on asphalt. I heard the heavy thud of car doors slamming. Then came the voice. It was amplified by a megaphone, but it cut through the night like a knife. "Police, we have the perimeter secured. Come out with your hands up." Skylar dropped the flashlight. It rolled across the floor, casting wild, spinning shadows on the walls. She screamed. It was a high, thin sound of pure terror. "Jalen," she screamed. "Jalen, help me!" But Jalen was not coming. Jalen was hiding under his duvet upstairs, praying that the police were there for someone else. Skylar was alone. She was alone in the dark with a bag full of nothing and a felony hanging over her head. I watched her collapse to the floor. She curled into a ball. The arrogance was gone. The influencer persona was gone. She was just a thief caught in the spotlight. The front door crashed open. I heard the heavy boots of the SWAT team hitting the hardwood floor. Police. "Show me your hands." Down on the ground. I watched the beams of the tactical lights sweep through the hallway. They were coming for her. I picked up my wine glass. It was empty. I sat back down. The show was almost over, but the lesson was just beginning. The tablet screen on my coffee table was the only source of light in my new apartment. It cast a ghostly blue glow on my face as I leaned forward to witness the finale of the tragedy my family had written for themselves. Skylar was standing in the center of my study. The piece of paper I had left for her was crumpled in her fist. I could see her chest heaving. She was not accepting the reality of the situation. She was in denial. She dropped the paper and turned back to the desk. She grabbed the handle of the locked drawer and pulled. She pulled with a violence that shook the heavy oak frame. "Where is it?" she screamed at the empty room. Her voice was thin and reedy through the speakers. "I know it is here. He is lying. He is trying to trick me." She reached into her bag and pulled out a screwdriver. She jammed it into the wood of the beautiful antique desk I had restored 10 years ago. She began to pry at the lock. Wood splintered. Varnish cracked. She was destroying a piece of history for a treasure that did not exist. I watched her sweat. I watched the desperation in her eyes. She looked like an animal caught in a snare, chewing its own leg off to escape. But she was not trying to escape. She was trying to dig deeper. Then the world outside the house exploded. It started with a flash. The front window of the living room was suddenly washed in blinding blue and red light. It was so bright it cut through the heavy curtains Skylar had drawn. The silent alarm had done its job. The police had arrived in stealth mode, and now they had surrounded the perimeter. They had cut the lights and killed the sirens until the very last second to ensure the suspect was trapped inside. Skylar froze. The screwdriver slipped from her hand and clattered onto the floor. She looked toward the window. Her eyes were wide, white circles of terror. She realized in that split second that the silence of the house had been a lie. She realized she was not alone. Then came the sound. It was not a knock. It was a thunderclap. The front door of the duplex did not open. It disintegrated. The heavy oak door I had varnished every summer for 20 years was hit by a battering ram with such force that I saw the frame buckle on the camera feed. Wood shards flew into the foyer like shrapnel. "Police, search warrant, go, go, go." The voices were deep and guttural. They were not asking for permission. They were commanding the space. I watched as 6 tactical officers in heavy body armor flooded into the hallway. They moved like a single organism. They had rifles raised. They had tactical lights mounted on their barrels that sliced through the darkness like laser beams. Skylar screamed. It was a sound I will never forget. It was the sound of a predator instantly becoming prey. She tried to run. She spun around and looked for a place to hide, but there was nowhere to go. The study had only one door and the police were already filling the hallway. She ducked behind the desk. She curled up into a ball, putting her hands over her head. "Show me your hands. Show me your hands right now." The lead officer kicked the study door fully open. His light swept the room and landed on Skylar. She was blinded. She held up a hand to shield her eyes. "Please," she sobbed. "I live here. I am the daughter-in-law. Please do not shoot." The police did not care about her family tree. They only cared about the threat level. The Blackwood security protocol had flagged this as a high-risk commercial burglary with a potential for armed suspects. They saw a figure hiding in the dark. They saw a screwdriver on the floor that looked like a weapon in the chaos. Get on the ground, face down, hands behind your back. Do it now. Two officers rushed forward. They did not ask her nicely. One of them grabbed her arm and pulled her out from behind the desk. He spun her around and forced her onto the hardwood floor. Skylar hit the ground hard. The breath was knocked out of her. "You are hurting me," she wailed. "I am innocent. Ask Major. Ask my father-in-law." "You have the right to remain silent," the officer shouted over her screaming. He pulled her arms behind her back. I heard the distinct metallic click of handcuffs ratcheting tight. I sat in my chair and took a deep breath. There was no joy in watching this. There was only the cold satisfaction of physics. Action and reaction, force and resistance. She had applied force to a structure that was not hers, and now the structure was crushing her. Then the camera feed in the hallway caught movement at the top of the stairs. The door to the upstairs unit flew open. Jalen appeared on the landing. He was wearing flannel pajama pants and a t-shirt. He looked disoriented. He looked terrified. He had heard the crash of the door. He had heard his wife screaming. "Skylar," he yelled. "What is happening?" He ran down the stairs. He did not stop to think. He did not assess the situation. For the first time in his life, he ran toward the danger instead of away from it. But his timing was catastrophic. He reached the bottom of the stairs just as the support team was securing the hallway. "Freeze! Police! Get on the ground!" The officers turned their weapons toward the stairs. They saw a man running toward them. They saw a man entering a secured crime scene from the second floor. To them, he was not a concerned husband. He was an accomplice coming to ambush them. Jalen skidded to a halt. He put his hands up. Wait, he stammered. "I live upstairs." "That is my wife. She just came down to get some papers." "Get on the ground now," the officer roared. He advanced on Jalen with his weapon raised. "But I have the key," Jalen cried. He reached into his pocket. It was the stupidest thing he could have done. He reached into his pocket in front of a SWAT team that was on high alert. "Drop it. Drop it or I will shoot." Jalen froze. He realized his mistake. He slowly pulled his empty hand out. He fell to his knees. He was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. "Please," he whimpered. "I am Jalen Gibson. My dad owns this place." "Your dad does not own this place anymore, son," an officer said as he grabbed Jalen by the shoulder and slammed him against the wall. "This property belongs to Blackwood Holdings, and you are trespassing in a restricted zone." Jalen looked confused. He looked like a child who had woken up in a nightmare. "Blackwood," he whispered. "What is Blackwood? Turn around." The officer spun Jalen around and kicked his legs apart. He patted him down roughly. He found the phone in his pocket. He found the keys. "We have a second suspect in custody," the officer spoke into his radio. "Male. Coming from the second floor unit. Possible lookout." "No." Jalen yelled as the cuffs clicked onto his wrists. "I am not a lookout. I was sleeping. I did not do anything." That was the tragedy of Jalen Gibson. He had spent his whole life doing nothing. He had done nothing when his wife insulted me. He had done nothing when she stole my ring. He had done nothing to stop her from breaking in tonight. And now he was being arrested for exactly that. For doing nothing while a crime was being committed. For being present. For being complicit. The officers dragged Skylar out of the study. She was weeping uncontrollably now. Her face was streaked with tears and snot. She looked at Jalen as they hauled her past him in the hallway. "You idiot," she screamed at him. "You were supposed to tell them. You were supposed to fix this." Jalen looked at her. He looked at the woman he had sacrificed his relationship with his father for. He saw her in handcuffs. He saw the hate in her eyes. And for the first time, he saw her clearly. "I tried to tell you," Jalen whispered. "I told you not to go down there." "Shut up," Skylar shrieked. "Just shut up." The police pushed them both toward the shattered front door. The flashing lights from the cruisers outside illuminated the destruction. My foyer was covered in splinters. My front door was hanging off its hinges, but the house was secure. The intruders were being removed. I watched them being led out onto the front porch. The neighbors were all outside now. I could see them standing on their lawns in their bathrobes. They were filming with their phones. Skylar wanted to be famous. She wanted to be an influencer. Well, she was about to get her wish. By tomorrow morning, videos of her being dragged out of her father-in-law's house in handcuffs would be all over the internet. I zoomed in on Jalen one last time. He looked back into the house before they pushed him into the back of a squad car. He looked right at the camera lens in the hallway light fixture. It was almost as if he knew I was watching. His eyes were filled with a terrible realization. He realized that his father was not in Florida. He realized that his father had orchestrated this entire evening. I sat back and closed the app on my tablet. The screen went black. The silence returned to my apartment. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for Mr. Sterling at Blackwood Holdings. It was 4 a.m, but he had told me to call him no matter what time it was if the alarm was triggered. He answered on the first ring. "Mr. Gibson," he said. His voice was alert. "Mr. Sterling," I said. "It appears there has been a security breach at your property." "I know," Sterling said. "My team is already on site. We have 2 individuals in custody. The police are processing them now. We are pressing full charges for commercial burglary and destruction of property." "Good," I said. "Do you know them?" Mr. Gibson Sterling asked. There was a pause on the line. "The police say they claim to be your family." I looked out the window at the sleeping city. I thought about the ring. I thought about the disrespect. I thought about the son who had watched his wife spit on my legacy and done nothing. I took a deep breath. "I have no family," I said. "My wife died 2 years ago. I live alone." I hung up the phone. I walked to the kitchen and poured the rest of the coffee down the sink. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. The demolition was complete. The rubble had been cleared. Now I could finally start to build something new. The fluorescent lights of the 21st District Police Station hummed with a low electric buzz that grated on the nerves. It was 5 a.m. on a Sunday. The station was a hive of controlled chaos. Telephones were ringing in the distance. Officers were walking briskly carrying paperwork and coffee cups. The air smelled of industrial cleaners' stale donuts and the sharp metallic tang of sweat. It was a place where people came when their lives had run off the rails. I walked through the double doors wearing a fresh suit I had changed into at my apartment. My shoes clicked rhythmically on the linoleum floor. I held my head high. I was not here as a suspect. I was not here as a worried father coming to bail out his wayward children. I was here as a witness. I approached the front desk. The sergeant on duty looked up. He was a man my age with tired eyes and gray hair. "I am Major Gibson," I said. My voice was calm and steady. "Detective Williams called me regarding the break-in at 442 Oak Street." The sergeant nodded. He typed something into his computer. "Right this way, Mr. Gibson. The detective is waiting for you in interview room B." I followed him down a long corridor painted a depressing shade of beige. We passed holding cells where men sat with their heads in their hands. We passed drunk drivers sleeping off their mistakes on wooden benches. Finally, we stopped at a metal door with a small, reinforced glass window. The sergeant opened the door. Inside the room, the atmosphere was suffocating. There was a metal table bolted to the floor. Sitting on one side were Jalen and Skylar. They were still in handcuffs. Skylar looked like a shipwreck. Her makeup was smeared across her face in black streaks. Her expensive silk robe was torn at the shoulder. Her hair was a bird's nest of tangles. She was shivering uncontrollably. Jalen sat next to her, staring at the table. He looked small. He looked like a boy who had broken a window and was waiting for the belt. Detective Williams stood in the corner. He was a tall man with a notebook in his hand. He nodded at me as I entered. "Thank you for coming down, Mr. Gibson," the detective said. I did not answer him immediately. I looked at the 2 people sitting at the table. As soon as Skylar saw me, her face transformed. It was a grotesque shift from despair to entitlement. She sat up straighter. Her eyes lit up with a frantic hope. "Major!" she screamed. Her voice was cracked and desperate. "Thank God you are here. Tell them! Tell these idiots who we are." She tried to stand up, but the handcuffs secured to the chair held her back. The chains rattled loudly. "Major, this is insane," she continued, rushing her words. "They think we are burglars. They think we broke in. Tell them it is your house. Tell them we live there. Tell them I am your daughter-in-law and Jalen is your son. Just tell them to let us go so we can go home." Jalen looked up. His eyes were red and swollen. "Dad," he whispered, "please, just clear this up. It is all a big misunderstanding." I pulled out the metal chair opposite them. I sat down slowly. I took my time adjusting my suit jacket. I placed my hands on the table and interlaced my fingers. I looked at Skylar. I looked at the woman who had called me senile. I looked at the woman who had planned to put me in a home. "I cannot tell them that, Skylar," I said softly. Skylar blinked. "What do you mean you cannot tell them? Just say the words. Say I am Major Gibson and this is my house and they have my permission to be there. It is simple." "No," I said. "It is not simple, because that would be a lie." The room went deadly silent. The hum of the lights seemed to get louder. "What are you talking about?" Jalen asked. His voice trembled. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a folded document. It was a copy of the sale agreement I had signed on Monday. I unfolded it and smoothed it out on the table. I turned it so they could read it. "I do not own the property at 442 Oak Street," I said. "I sold it 5 days ago." Skylar stared at the paper. Her eyes darted back and forth, scanning the legal text. "Sold it," she whispered. "That is impossible. You live there. We live there." "I lived there," I corrected her. "Until yesterday at noon. That was when the transfer of ownership was finalized. The new owner is a corporation called Blackwood Holdings. They took possession of the unit at 1 o'clock yesterday afternoon." I leaned forward. My voice dropped an octave. "When you drilled that lock at 3 in the morning, Skylar, you were not entering your father-in-law's home. You were breaking and entering into a secured commercial asset owned by a multi-billion-dollar investment firm. You were trespassing on corporate property." Skylar's face drained of all color. She looked like a ghost. "No," she stammered. "No, you are lying. You are just saying this to scare me. You cannot sell a house in a week. That is not how it works. It is how it works when you sell for cash below market value to sharks," I said. "I sold it cheap, Skylar. I sold it fast. And I sold it with one specific condition: that they install a military-grade security system immediately upon my departure." I looked at Detective Williams. "Detective," I said, "did the Blackwood legal team contact you?" Detective Williams nodded. "Yes, sir. They faxed over the title deed an hour ago. They are pressing full charges. They have a zero-tolerance policy for security breaches. They are claiming damages for the door and the lock. And since the suspects were found inside with burglary tools, they are pushing for felony burglary." "Felony burglary!" Skylar shrieked. She pulled at her handcuffs. "This is a setup. He set us up. Jalen, say something. He is crazy. He trapped us." Jalen was staring at the sale document. He was reading the date. He was reading the signature. "You sold the house," Jalen whispered. "You really sold it. Without telling me." I looked at my son. I saw the betrayal in his eyes. But it did not mirror the betrayal I had felt for 3 years. "I gave you the keys, Jalen," I said. "I handed you the keys and I asked you to keep the place safe. 7 minutes later, you let her call a locksmith. You did not protect the house. You handed it over to the wolves. Why should I consult you about a property you have no respect for?" Jalen looked down. A tear rolled down his cheek. "But why, Dad?" he asked. "Why did you do this to us?" I did not answer him directly. I reached into my pocket again. This time I pulled out my tablet. "Because of this," I said. I woke the screen. I opened the video file I had saved from Tuesday morning. I placed the tablet in the center of the table. "Watch," I commanded. Skylar tried to look away, but she could not. The screen showed the hallway of the duplex. It showed the date and time. It showed Skylar walking out of my bedroom. It showed the smile on her face. And it showed the diamond ring glittering in her hand. Jalen leaned in. He squinted at the screen. "Is that Mom's ring?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "That is the ring you told me she borrowed. That is the ring you said she took for a photo shoot." I paused the video on the frame where Skylar shoved the ring into her pocket. "Look closely, Jalen," I said. "Does that look like borrowing to you?" She did not ask. She did not leave a note. She waited until I was buying milk, and she stole the only piece of your mother I had left. Skylar began to cry again, but these were crocodile tears. "I was going to put it back," she sobbed. "I swear, Major, I was going to put it back." I ignored her. I kept my eyes on Jalen. "And you knew," I said to him. "You knew she took it. And instead of acting like a man and making her return it, you came down to my kitchen and lied to my face. You told me I was crazy. You told me I was imagining things. You chose a thief over your own father." Jalen looked at Skylar. For the first time, the fog of his infatuation seemed to lift. He looked at the woman sitting next to him in handcuffs. He looked at the video of her stealing from a dead woman. He looked at the sale deed that proved they were homeless. "You lied to me," Jalen said to her. His voice was quiet. "You told me Dad said it was okay. You told me you asked him." Skylar snapped. "Oh, shut up, Jalen," she spat. "Who cares about the stupid ring? Do you not see what is happening? We are going to prison. Focus on that, you idiot." I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. "You are right, Skylar," I said. "You are going to prison. Blackwood Holdings does not drop charges. They have lawyers who eat people like you for lunch. And since the value of the ring you stole is over $5,000, the district attorney is adding grand larceny to your list of charges." I buttoned my jacket. I felt light. The weight of the secret was gone. I turned to Detective Williams. "I have given my statement, Detective. Is there anything else you need from me?" "No, Mr. Gibson," the detective said. "You are free to go. We have everything we need." I turned to leave. "Dad," Jalen cried out. "Dad, wait. You cannot leave us here, please. I did not know about the ring, I swear. I just wanted to keep the peace. Help me. I am your son." I stopped at the door. I looked back at them one last time. They looked like two children who had played with matches and burned the whole forest down. "I raised a son," I said. "I raised a man who knew right from wrong. I do not know who you are. The man sitting in that chair is a stranger to me, and I do not bail out strangers who break into corporate property." "But where will we go?" Jalen asked. "We have nowhere to live." I looked at Skylar. "I am sure Skylar has a plan," I said. "She always has a plan. She wanted space. She wanted a studio. Well, she has a cell now. It is small, but the lighting is very dramatic." I opened the door. "Goodbye, Jalen," I said. I stepped out into the hallway and let the heavy metal doors slam shut behind me. The sound echoed like a gavel striking a block. I walked down the beige corridor. I walked past the front desk. I walked out into the cool morning air. The sun was just starting to rise over the Chicago skyline. The sky was turning a pale purple. It was a new day. I took a deep breath. The air tasted clean. It tasted like freedom. I walked to the curb and hailed a taxi. "Lakeview Apartments." "Please?" I told the driver. I sat back and watched the city wake up. I did not feel guilt. I did not feel regret. I felt like a structural engineer who had finally demolished a condemned building. The site was cleared. The debris was hauled away. Now I could build something that would last. The sun was high in the sky over Chicago by the time my phone rang again. It was noon on Sunday. I was sitting in my new living room watching the local news on mute. I had been expecting a call from Detective Williams to confirm that they had recovered Betty's ring. I assumed it would be a short conversation. I assumed he would tell me that they found the ring in Skylar's jewelry box and that it was being held as evidence. I was prepared for that. I was prepared for the theft. I was not prepared for the avalanche that was about to bury my son and his wife. I answered the phone. "Mr. Gibson, this is Detective Williams." I could hear the exhaustion in his voice, but there was something else too. There was a buzz of activity in the background that sounded far more chaotic than the station had been earlier. I heard men shouting instructions. I heard the sound of heavy tape being ripped from dispensers. "Did you find the ring, Detective?" I asked. "We found the ring," Williams said. "It was exactly where we expected it to be, tucked inside a sock in the top drawer of the suspect's dresser. We have photographed it and logged it." "But, Mr. Gibson, we found a lot more than just a ring." I leaned forward in my chair. The tone of his voice had shifted. It was no longer just a burglary case. It sounded like he had stumbled onto a battlefield. "What do you mean, Detective?" I asked. Williams sighed. "When we executed the search warrant for the upstairs unit, we had probable cause to search any container small enough to hold a diamond ring. That means every drawer, every box, every bag. And Mr. Gibson, your son and daughter-in-law, have a lot of bags." I frowned. I knew Skylar liked to shop. I knew she had a closet full of clothes. "She is an influencer," I said. "She buys things for her photos." "No," Sir Williams said. "You do not understand. We are not talking about a closet. We are talking about a warehouse. We found 350 luxury handbags stacked in the spare bedroom. We found another 200 in the attic space. Hermes, Chanel, Louis Vuitton, Gucci, you name it, she had it." I felt a wave of confusion. Skylar and Jalen were always broke. They borrowed money for rent. They borrowed money for groceries. How could they afford $500,000 worth of designer purses? Are they real? I asked. Williams let out a short, dry laugh. No, sir. They are not real. They are high-quality counterfeits. We found the shipping manifests. They are coming in from a supplier in Guangdong, China. She is buying them for $50 apiece and reselling them on her website as authentic vintage or gently used for $2,000. I sat back in my chair. The room spun slightly. Counterfeiting, I whispered. It gets worse, Williams continued, because of the volume of goods and the fact that she was using the United States Postal Service to ship these fraudulent items across state lines. This is no longer just a local police matter. I have agents from the FBI and Homeland Security here right now. They are seizing everything. They are seizing the inventory. They are seizing the computers. They are seizing the financial records. I closed my eyes. I tried to picture the upstairs apartment. I tried to picture the spare room that Jalen had once told me was his home office. He had lied. It was a distribution center for a criminal enterprise. And Jalen, I asked. My voice felt heavy. That is the problem, Mr. Gibson, Williams said. We found receipts with his signature on them. We found shipping labels printed from his account. He was driving the packages to the post office. He was depositing the money into accounts under his name to avoid triggering tax audits on Skylar's main account. He is deep in this. He is not just a husband. He is the CFO of a federal smuggling operation. I hung up the phone. I stared at the blank wall of my apartment. I thought I knew my family. I thought I knew their flaws. I thought Skylar was lazy and greedy. I thought Jalen was weak and submissive. I did not know they were felons. I did not know that every time they complained about being poor, they were sitting on a mountain of illegal leather and glue. I turned the volume up on the television. Breaking news appeared on the screen. The helicopter shot showed my old house. It showed the duplex on Oak Street. There were police vans everywhere. There were men in windbreakers with yellow letters on the back. FBI. They were forming a line carrying brown cardboard boxes out of the house, box after box. They were loading them into a truck. I watched my neighbors standing on the sidewalk. I saw Mrs. Higgins, who had lived next door for 30 years, holding her hand over her mouth. She was watching the house of a structural engineer being dismantled like a drug den. I felt a strange sense of detachment. That was not my house anymore. I had sold it. Blackwood Holdings owned that mess. But the shame still clung to me. My name was on the mailbox. My history was in the walls. I thought about Skylar's business. She called herself a lifestyle guru. She preached authenticity. She preached luxury. And it was all a lie. Her entire life was a counterfeit. Her face was filtered. Her personality was curated. And her business was a fraud. She was selling fake status to people who could not afford the real thing. And Jalen, my son, the boy I had taught to fish, the boy I had taught to measure twice and cut once. He had applied those lessons to crime. He had structured the bank deposits. He had managed the logistics. He had used his education to help his wife lie to the government. He had looked me in the eye and asked for money for groceries while he was laundering thousands of dollars through his checking account. The phone rang again. It was Mr. Sterling from Blackwood Holdings, Mr. Gibson Sterling said. His voice was cold as ice. I am watching the news, Mr. Sterling, I said. This is a disaster, Sterling said. The FBI has seized the property as a crime scene. They are tearing up the floorboards looking for cash. They are cutting into the walls. I am sorry, Mr. Sterling, I said. I truly am. I had no idea. I believe you, Sterling said. The police told me you were the one who tipped them off about the break-in. If you had known about the counterfeiting ring, you would have called them years ago. You are a man of principle, Mr. Gibson. But your son is going to prison for a very long time. How long, I asked. Trafficking in counterfeit goods, wire fraud, mail fraud, tax evasion. Sterling rattled off the charges like a grocery list. Federal judges do not like it when you mess with the IRS. They are looking at 10 years minimum, maybe 20 if the money laundering charges stick. 20 years. I put the phone down on the table. I walked to the window. The city of Chicago looked beautiful in the afternoon sun. The lake was a brilliant blue. It was a real city built with real steel and real concrete. I thought about the nature of fakes. A fake beam looks like a real beam, but if you put a load on it, it snaps. A fake diamond shines like a real diamond, but it cannot cut glass. A fake life looks like a real life on Instagram, but when the police kick down the door, there is no foundation to hold it up. Skylar had built her castle on a swamp of lies. She thought she was smart. She thought she was beating the system. She thought she could steal my house and use it to store her stolen goods. She did not realize that the house itself had rejected her. I imagined the police opening those boxes. I imagined the smell of the cheap chemical glue filling the room. That smell was the scent of Skylar's soul. I imagined Jalen sitting in a federal interrogation room. The local police were scary, but the FBI agents were a different breed. They were accountants with badges. They would show him the spreadsheets. They would show him the bank transfers. They would show him exactly how he had signed his own life away. He would try to blame Skylar. He would say she made him do it. And maybe she did. But he was the one who drove the car. He was the one who licked the stamps. He was the one who chose the easy lie over the hard truth. I went to my bedroom and opened my suitcase. I took out the only photo I had kept of Jalen. It was from his college graduation. He was smiling, wearing his cap and gown, holding his diploma. He looked so proud. He looked like he had the whole world ahead of him. I looked at that face and I tried to find the criminal inside. I tried to find the smuggler. I could not see it. All I saw was a boy who wanted to be liked, a boy who wanted to please people, and that was his fatal flaw. He wanted to please a woman who could never be pleased. He wanted to buy her love with fake bags and laundered money. I took the photo and walked to the kitchen. I held it over the trash can. I hesitated. He was my son. But he was also a felon who had helped destroy my home. I did not drop the photo. I put it in a drawer. I could not throw him away completely, not yet, but I could close the drawer. I could put him in the dark, just like he was now. I went back to the living room. The news was still on. They were interviewing a neighbor. It was Mrs. Higgins. He was always such a quiet man, she was saying about me. A good man. He kept his yard clean. I feel so bad for him. He raised that boy better than this. Thank you, Mrs. Higgins, I whispered at the screen. I turned off the TV. The silence of the apartment returned. I had exposed the rot. I had shone a light on the termites. But I did not realize how deep the infestation went. The whole house was eaten away. Skylar was not just a bad daughter-in-law. She was a criminal mastermind. And Jalen was her willing puppet. The FBI would take the bags. The IRS would take the money. Blackwood Holdings would take the house. And I would take my freedom. I poured myself another cup of coffee. It was real coffee. Real. It was bitter and hot and honest. I drank it slowly. The investigation would take months. The trial would take years. But the verdict was already in. They were guilty. They were guilty of thinking they could fake their way through life. And reality had finally come to collect the debt. Tuesday morning arrived with a relentless gray drizzle that blanketed Chicago in a cold, wet sheet. It was the kind of rain that soaked into your bones and made the city look like an old black and white photograph. I was sitting on the balcony of my new apartment on the 10th floor. I was wearing a thick wool sweater and drinking a cup of Earl Grey tea. I watched the traffic crawling along Lakeshore Drive. From up here, the cars looked like toys. The problems of the world seemed small and distant. I felt a sense of peace that I had not felt in years. My phone was sitting on the small metal table next to my teacup. It had been silent all morning. I knew that silence was temporary. I knew the storm was coming. At 11 o'clock, the phone began to vibrate. The buzzing sound against the metal table was harsh and insistent. I looked at the screen. The name Jalen flashed in bright white letters. I let it ring 4 times. I took a sip of tea. I needed to fortify myself. I needed to build a wall around my heart before I answered. I knew this call was coming. Mr. Sterling from Blackwood Holdings had sent me a text message 10 minutes earlier. It was short and professional. Eviction in progress. Asset cleared. I picked up the phone. I swiped the green button. I did not say hello. I just listened. Dad, are you there? The voice on the other end was hysterical. It was high-pitched and broken by jagged sobs. It sounded like a child who had scraped his knee on the playground. But Jalen was not a child. He was a 32-year-old man standing in the rain. I am here, Jalen, I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice of a man who was done shouting. They threw me out, Dad. They actually threw me out. You have to come down here. You have to help me. I could hear the wind blowing into the microphone of his phone. I could hear cars splashing through puddles in the background. Who threw you out, Jalen? I asked, even though I knew the answer. The security guards. Jalen screamed. The Blackwood guys. They came with the police. They gave me 10 minutes, Dad. 10 minutes to pack a bag. They changed the locks while I was standing on the porch. They put all our stuff on the curb. Everything is getting wet. The sofa, the TV, it is all ruined. I closed my eyes. I imagined the scene. I imagined the leather sofa sitting on the wet sidewalk. I imagined the neighbors peering through their curtains watching the Gibson boy being evicted like a squatter. It was a humiliation, but it was a necessary humiliation. Jalen, listen to me, I said. You knew this was coming. I told you at the police station. I sold the house. You do not have a lease. You are trespassing. But where am I supposed to go? Jalen wailed. Skylar is in jail. They denied her bail because she is a flight risk. I am all alone, Dad. I have no money. The FBI froze my accounts. I cannot even buy a sandwich. I am standing in the rain with a trash bag full of clothes. You did this to me. You ruined my life. I felt a flash of anger. It was hot and sharp. Even now, standing in the wreckage of his own choices, he was blaming me. He was pointing the finger at the man who had sheltered him for 3 decades. I did not do this, Jalen, I said. My voice hardened. I did not buy 500 fake handbags. I did not set up a shell company to launder money. I did not steal a ring from a dead woman. You did those things. You and your wife. I just turned on the lights. It was just a business, Jalen argued. His voice was desperate. We were going to pay taxes eventually. We were just trying to get ahead. Why are you being so cruel? We are family. You are supposed to protect family. I stood up and walked to the edge of the balcony. The wind whipped at my face. I did protect you, I said. I protected you for 32 years. I paid for your college. I let you live rent-free. I fixed your car when you crashed it. I paid your credit card debt when you overspent. I protected you from the consequences of your own mediocrity. And look what happened. My protection made you weak. My protection made you think you were entitled to things you did not earn. But I am homeless. Dad. Jalen sobbed. He was crying harder now. It was a pathetic sound. I have nowhere to go. Please, just let me come to your new place. I will sleep on the floor. I will get a job. I will do anything. Just do not leave me on the street. I gripped the railing of the balcony. My knuckles turned white. This was the moment. This was the test. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to go get him. He was my son. He was my blood. The image of him standing in the rain broke my heart. But I knew that if I went to get him, I would be killing him. I would be killing the last chance he had to become a man. If I saved him now, he would never learn. He would spend the rest of his life waiting for me to clean up his messes. I cannot do that, Jalen, I said. What do you mean you cannot? Jalen asked. The sobbing stopped for a second, replaced by shock. You are my father. You have to help me. No, I said. I do not. Being a father does not mean being a doormat. Being a father does not mean financing a criminal. You are an accomplice to a felony, Jalen. You are facing federal charges. You need a lawyer, not a place to crash. I need you, Jalen whispered. No, I said firmly. You need to grow up. I took a deep breath. I looked at the gray sky. I looked at the concrete jungle of Chicago. I gathered all the strength I had left. I did not raise a 32-year-old child, I said. I spoke each word clearly and slowly so he would never forget them. I raised a man. I raised a man who knows how to work. I raised a man who knows right from wrong. But somewhere along the way, you decided to refuse that heritage. You refused to grow up. You decided it was easier to be a child. You decided it was easier to let Skylar think for you. You decided it was easier to steal than to build. I paused. I heard him breathing on the other end. Well, the playground is closed, Jalen, I continued. The safety net is gone. I cut it down. You are falling now. And you are going to hit the ground hard. It is going to hurt. It is going to be cold and wet and lonely. But that impact is the only thing that can save you. You need to feel the pavement. You need to feel the hunger. You need to understand that the world owes you absolutely nothing. Dad, please, Jalen begged. His voice was cracking. Do not do this. "I am doing this because I love you," I said. "And God help me, it is the hardest thing I have ever done. But I will not let you drag me down with you. I will not let you turn my life into a tragedy. I am done. The bank of Dad is closed. The hotel of Dad is closed. So what do I do?" Jalen asked. He sounded small. He sounded lost. "You learn," I said. "You figure it out. There are shelters. There are public defenders. There are day labor agencies. You have 2 hands and a brain. Use them. Stop looking for a handout and start looking for a mirror. The only person who can save Jalen Gibson is Jalen Gibson." But Dad. Jalen started. "Goodbye, Jalen," I said. I pulled the phone away from my ear. I looked at the red button. My thumb hovered over it. I felt a tear roll down my own cheek. It was hot and salty. I was mourning the boy he used to be. I was mourning the future I thought we would have. I pressed the button. The line went dead. I put the phone back on the table. I stared at it. I waited for it to ring again. I knew he would call back. He would call and call until he realized I was not going to answer. I picked up my tea. It had gone cold. I drank it anyway. The bitterness matched the taste in my mouth. I walked back into my apartment and closed the sliding glass door. I locked it. The sound of the lock clicking shut echoed in the empty room. I walked to the kitchen and opened the drawer where I had put his graduation photo. I looked at it one more time. "I hope you make it, son," I whispered to the smiling boy in the picture. "I hope you find your way back. But you have to walk that road alone." I closed the drawer. I went to my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. I felt exhausted. My body felt heavy. It was a spiritual fatigue. I had just amputated a limb to save the body. It was necessary, but the phantom pain was already setting in. I lay back on the pillows and stared at the white ceiling. I thought about Jalen standing in the rain. I hoped the rain would wash him clean. I hoped the cold would wake him up. I had done my job. I had been the villain in his story so he could eventually become the hero of his own. Now all I could do was wait, and pray that the foundation I had poured 30 years ago was strong enough to withstand the storm. 3 months is a lifetime when you are waiting for the hammer to fall. For 3 months I lived in my quiet apartment on the 10th floor, watching the seasons change from the balcony. But down on the ground, the legal machine was grinding my family into dust. The federal courthouse in Chicago is a building designed to intimidate. It is a monolith of stone and glass that says without words that the games are over. I walked into courtroom 4 on a Tuesday morning in November. The air inside was cold and smelled of floor wax and old paper. I took a seat in the back row. I did not want to be close to the front. I wanted to see the whole picture. I wanted to see the structure of justice. Skylar and Jalen were already seated at the defense table. They looked like strangers. The orange jumpsuits of the Federal Detention Center hung loosely on their frames. Skylar had lost weight. Her hair, which she used to spend hours styling, was pulled back in a severe bun. Her roots were showing. The facade of the glamorous influencer was gone, and all that was left was a scared young woman facing the consequences of her greed. Jalen sat next to her, but he was not looking at her. He was staring at his hands, which were shackled to the table. He looked broken. He looked like a man who had woken up from a long dream only to find himself in a nightmare. The trial had been going on for 3 days, but today was the closing arguments and the verdict. Skylar's lawyer was a man named Mr. Thorne. He was a high-priced attorney paid for by selling Skylar's car and liquidating what little assets they had left. He stood up and walked toward the jury box. He was a performer. He used his hands and his voice to weave a story that sounded almost plausible if you did not know the truth. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Mr. Thorne began, his voice smooth as oil. "What we have here is not a crime. It is a tragedy of miscommunication. We have a young woman trying to build a business. We have a devoted son trying to navigate the difficult waters of caring for an aging father. Major Gibson is a man of a certain age. He is confused. He gave them keys. He gave them permission. And then in a moment of senile paranoia, he forgot. He set a trap for his own children. Is Skylar ambitious? Yes. Is she guilty of loving luxury? Perhaps. But is she a burglar? No. She entered that home believing she had the right to be there. She entered that home to retrieve a document she thought would help the family. I sat in the back and listened to him paint me as the villain. He called me confused. He called me bitter. He called me a man whose memory was failing. It was a clever strategy. If the jury believed I was unreliable, then the trespassing charge would fall apart. And if the trespassing charge fell apart, the search warrant that found the counterfeit bags might be thrown out as fruit of the poisonous tree. I felt a heat rising in my chest, but I clamped it down. I am an engineer. I do not fight with emotion. I fight with data. The prosecutor was a woman named Ms. Vance. She was sharp and direct. She called me to the stand as a rebuttal witness. I walked down the aisle. The wooden gate swung open. I passed the defense table. Skylar looked up at me. Her eyes were pleading. She mouthed the word please. I did not look away. I looked right at her. And then I kept walking. I sat in the witness box. I swore to tell the truth. Mr. Gibson, Miss Vance asked, "The defense claims you gave permission for the defendants to enter your home. They claim you are confused about the events of that night. How do you respond?" I reached into the inside pocket of my suit jacket. I pulled out a small black notebook. It was battered. The corners were worn. It was the same notebook I had carried on job sites for 40 years. "I am a structural engineer," I said. My voice filled the room. "I do not rely on memory. Memory is soft. Memory bends. I rely on documentation." I held up the notebook. "This is my logbook," I continued. "From the moment Skylar moved into my house, I began to notice things missing. I began to notice boundaries being crossed. So I did what I have always done. I wrote it down." Mr. Thorne jumped up. "Objection," he shouted. "We have not seen this evidence," overruled the judge said. "The witness may proceed." I opened the book. The pages crinkled in the silence. Entry number 1 I read. May 4th, 10:17 a.m. Subject Skylar Gibson entered Unit A using unauthorized key. Duration 12 minutes. Item removed. Vintage Miles Davis record. Condition return damaged. I turned the page. Entry number 5, May 20th, 2 p.m. Subject entered while I was at physical therapy. Item removed. Cash from emergency jar, $50. I turned another page. I could hear Skylar breathing rapidly. Entry number 18 I read. My voice was hard as steel. This was the one that mattered. July 12th, 10 a.m. Subject entered master bedroom. Item removed. Diamond engagement ring belonging to deceased wife Betty Gibson. Confronted son Jalen regarding theft. He denied knowledge. I looked up at the jury. They were leaning forward. They were not looking at a confused old man. They were looking at a man who had kept receipts. This was not a misunderstanding, I told them. This was a siege. 18 times she broke into my home. 18 times she stole from me. I did not sell that house because I was confused. I sold it because I was being hunted in my own living room. I closed the book. The sound was like a gunshot. Skylar put her head down on the table and began to sob. Her lawyer slumped in his chair. He knew it was over. The narrative of the innocent victim had just been demolished by a 68-year-old man with a notebook. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they came back, they did not look at the defendants. We find the defendant Skylar Gibson guilty on all counts the foreman read. Burglary, grand larceny, trafficking in counterfeit goods, wire fraud. We find the defendant Jalen Gibson guilty of conspiracy to commit trafficking and aiding and abetting. The judge asked Skylar to stand for sentencing. Skylar stood up. Her legs were shaking so bad she had to lean on the table. Skylar Gibson, the judge said sternly, "You preyed on a family member. You used his home as a base for a criminal enterprise. You showed no remorse until the moment you were caught. You are sentenced to 36 months in federal prison followed by 5 years of supervised release. You are also ordered to pay restitution to the victims of your fraud." 3 years. I watched Skylar collapse into her chair. She screamed. It was a raw, primal sound of a life ending. 3 years in a federal penitentiary. No Instagram, no brunch, no luxury. Just concrete and consequences. Then the judge turned to Jalen. "Jalen Gibson, stand up." Jalen stood. He looked at me. His eyes were filled with tears. "Mr. Gibson," the judge said, "your role in this was secondary but essential. You facilitated these crimes. You drove the car. You signed the receipts. But the court recognizes that you were under significant influence and you have no prior criminal record." I held my breath. "You are sentenced to 5 years of probation," the judge ruled. You will serve 6 months of house arrest. You will complete 500 hours of community service, and you will pay a fine of $50,000. If you violate any terms of this probation, you will go to prison for 5 years. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Jalen whispered. It was a mercy, a small mercy. He was not going to prison, but his life as he knew it was over. He was a convicted felon. He had no job, he had no home, he had a massive debt, and he had a wife who was going away for a long time. The bailiff moved to take Skylar away. "Jalen," she screamed, reaching for him. "Do not let them take me. Call my mom. Do something." Jalen pulled away from her. He stepped back. For the first time, he did not reach for her. He let the marshals take her. I watched as they dragged her through the side door. Her screams echoed in the hallway until the heavy door slammed shut, silencing her. Jalen stood alone at the defense table. The lawyer was packing up his briefcase, ignoring him. Jalen looked across the courtroom at me. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I did not smile. I did not wave. I looked at him with the gaze of a man who had survived a natural disaster. He took a step toward me, but the marshal stopped him. "Mr. Gibson, you have to come with us for processing," the marshal said. Jalen nodded. He looked at me one last time. He mouthed the words, "I am sorry." I nodded once. Slowly, I turned and walked out of the courtroom. I walked past the reporters who were waiting in the hall. I walked out of the building and down the wide stone steps. The air outside was cold and biting. It was the kind of wind that strips the leaves from the trees. It was over. The trial was done. The verdict was in. I had lost a daughter-in-law to greed. I had lost a son to weakness. But I had kept my dignity. I had kept my truth. I hailed a cab. I am going home, I thought. Not to the house on Oak Street. That was gone. I was going to the quiet, empty peace of my own life. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally sleep. The mist off Lake Geneva has a way of silencing the world at 6 in the morning. It is a thick white blanket that covers the water and the pine trees surrounding my new cabin. I bought this place with the money I saved from the sale of the duplex. It is not a mansion. It is a simple 2-bedroom structure made of cedar and stone. The floors are rough-hewn timber and the fireplace works. It is solid. It is quiet. It is mine. I sat on the wooden dock with my legs dangling over the edge. The water was cold and dark. My fishing rod rested against my knee. Next to my tackle box sat a white envelope. It arrived yesterday in the mail. The handwriting on the front was messy and hurried. It was Jalen's handwriting. I had hesitated to open it. For 6 months I had enjoyed the silence. No frantic phone calls, no demands for money, no drama about fake handbags or stolen rings, just the sound of the wind and the birds. But curiosity is a stubborn thing. I had opened it over breakfast. I picked up the letter now and read it one more time in the morning light. "Dear Dad," he wrote, "I am writing this from the break room at the fulfillment center. My shift ends in 20 minutes. I have been lifting boxes for 12 hours. My back is killing me and my feet are blistered. I just wanted to tell you that I finally paid off the first installment of my court fines. It took me 3 months of double shifts, but I did it. I did not ask anyone for help. I ate ramen noodles and I took the bus. I know you probably do not care, but I wanted you to know that I am trying. I saw a ring in a pawn shop window yesterday. It looked a little bit like Mom's. I almost went in to ask the price, but then I remembered I have rent to pay. I walked away. I hope the fishing is good. Jalen." I folded the paper. The paper was cheap and thin. It smelled faintly of cardboard and sweat. It was not a perfect letter. He was still complaining. He was still looking for approval. But for the first time in his life, he was talking about earning money instead of spending it. He was talking about pain as a result of labor, not as a result of being a victim. I put the letter back in the envelope. I reached into my pocket and took out a pen. I thought about writing back. I thought about telling him I was proud of him for paying his fine, but I put the pen away. Not yet. He had paid 1 installment. He had worked for 3 months. That is a start, but it is not a transformation. He needs a year, maybe 2. He needs to understand that the blister on his foot is a badge of honor, not a tragedy. He needs to learn that silence is not a punishment, but a gift. I placed the letter inside my tackle box and latched it shut. I would keep it. I would save it. And maybe next year, if another letter came with news of a second installment paid, I would write back. I stood up and picked up my rod. I pulled my arm back and cast the line out into the mist. The lure hit the water with a soft plop and sank beneath the surface. I watched the ripples spread out in perfect circles. I thought about Skylar sitting in a cell in a federal prison. I thought about Jalen loading trucks in the rain. I thought about the duplex on Oak Street, which was now being renovated by Blackwood Holdings into luxury condos. None of it mattered anymore. I took a deep breath of the pine-scented air. The structural integrity of my life had been restored. The load was balanced. The foundation was secure. I reeled in the line just a little bit, feeling the tension of the water. "Life is beautiful," I whispered to the lake. "It is beautiful and simple and good, as long as you have the courage to cut the line when the weight gets too heavy." I sat down and waited for a bite. I had all the time in the world, and for the first time in 40 years, I was exactly where I wanted to be. I spent 40 years calculating load limits for steel and concrete, but I failed to calculate the limit of my own generosity. I learned that true love is not about endless giving. It is about knowing when to stop. By shielding Jalen from the rain for so long, I never let him learn how to build his own roof. I realized that family is not defined by who sits at your table, but by who respects the person sitting at the head of it. Dignity is a structure you must maintain yourself, even if it means evicting the people you once carried. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let them fall. If you agree that respect is non-negotiable, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Have you ever had to make a tough decision to cut off a toxic family member to save your own peace? Let me know your story in the comments below. I read every single one,